press it?
Yeah, push the
Okay.
button.
I pressed it.
Good.
Any second. Okay, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to part 2 of the 2-part series that at first we didn't realize was going to be a 2-part series. How you doing, Brian? This is the pre-show. You can just be chill still for a bit.
Okay, phew. I was gonna say, hey, Elon, I'm doing great.
No, let's keep it cool. We can save it.
Yeah, we gotta save it. Save up what remains. Everything's good, you know. It's been it's 3 barbecue days in a row.
What kind?
And
same types of foods like burgers and hot dogs at each one?
yeah, pretty standard barbecue. It was fun. Like I thought it would get old by the third. It didn't. And I even
Beers?
had like a leftover hot dog today.
Hmm. Were there good beers at these barbecues? That's pretty standard, right?
Yeah, it should be. These weren't very beery barbecues.
Okay, well that's
Yeah,
okay.
it was nice. It was
I went
fun.
to a wedding yesterday.
Oh yeah, I need to get invited to a wedding. I have so many people telling me they went to weddings, and it sounds like so much
Oh.
fun. Was yours
I'm
fun?
going to a wedding, another one in August.
Can I be your plus one?
You know what? I have a +1 that I'm not using, but
Really?
it's too late. It's a mutual friend of ours, John A. You know who I'm
Oh, it's happening
yeah, in
after all
Vancouver.
these years.
Actually, if
Oh,
anyone's listening here,
that's another one. I thought it was I thought it was the other John A.
the one
But
that's been married
I
for
was
like a
at
million
that one.
years.
Yeah, and then I remember that.
Okay.
Was I at
Anyway,
that one? I think I was.
so maybe we could probably save this for also
Wow.
for more
He'd be happy
inside
to
news.
see me.
I mean, sure. Message him first. Don't
Well,
just
no,
show up.
Just invite me.
You
I'm your you have a plus one?
But like, I don't
RSVP.
think it works like that. Like the +1 was like Elon and Dina are invited. That wasn't like Elon plus like
Oh,
anyone
I
he
didn't say
wants.
Elon and guest.
No, like he
Oh.
knows Dina.
If you wrote him and said you wanted to bring me instead, he wouldn't say no.
Would you? You wouldn't even come. So I know this is like a silly bit you're doing.
Maybe
it's
I
in
would.
Vancouver.
What's
You'd come
the
to
date?
Vancouver?
What's the date? I'm looking at flights right now.
No, you're not.
I
Okay,
am. I'm flights.google.com.
all right.
I know the flights website.
I don't care that you know that doesn't prove anything. Okay, I'm going to share your screen.
Wrong.
Share your screen if you're looking up flights.
Like actually, you want?
No, I don't want you to.
Want
Actually,
that much proof?
I'm gonna go
That's
first.
ridiculous.
I don't care. This is another one of these conversations that we usually have where I'm just like,
where you hate it.
can we leave? Can I get out of this?
Go get your water.
We could bring we should talk about hockey. But okay, I'm gonna go get some water quickly because that's something I didn't realize I didn't have. But
you told me I could be chill. I'm being chill. What's the date?
Talk to the patrons about
What's the date?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm not gonna look it up. I'll look it up while I get water.
I wish you would look it up now.
Now I want you to tell the listeners this is only for live show listeners, your thoughts.
I hope it's on the weekend of the 27th because flights look very reasonable that weekend.
Okay. Talk about your thoughts on Craig Anderson signing with Buffalo for 2 years.
Oh, it happened.
It happened.
Okay.
But they did say that it's not like as a starter. Like they're still planning on being active, but I guess they're excited to have him as like, someone that's there.
Sure.
But, yeah. Okay. So speak on that and I'll be back in a moment.
Thanks, Linda Richmond. Okay. Craig Anderson. Bring a patron. That's funny, Shams. Craig Anderson signing it just so happens I just recently finished the 32 Beats episode that where Ben interviewed Joe Yerdon, which was awesome. They were great. Actually, I was really excited. One thing I love to hear. Well, first, I'd love to hear that Joe basically confirmed my own takes on Tage Thompson. And then second, I loved that Rasmus Dahlin, like Yerdon feels like very confident in and thinks like he's still like a world-class player and the sky's the limit. So those are both really exciting. I was also interested to hear, I'm not going to spoil I am spoiling the whole episode, but that Yerdon said, occasionally he wouldn't be surprised if Owen Power stepped up to the top unit and like swapped with Rasmus Dahlin, which honestly, I think that's the Sabres maybe towards the end of the year, they'll see, but I hope it's not a moment. Like, I feel like Hedman in Tampa once upon a time would get booted every so often and we'd panic. No, is this the end? Is Sergachev taking over? But you never actually had to panic. You just had to wait it out.
You're talking about being worried about Dahlin?
I haven't even talked about Craig Anderson.
Okay.
I was saying how I finished the 32 Beats Joe Yerdon episode and was sort of sharing some of my top takeaways. But yeah, he said Joe said in the interview that Anderson has a contract if he wants it. Like it's on the table. He's going to be a mentor. He's not like he was brought in to mentor UPL, not to be like a volume starter, but just to be like this
Yeah, I heard it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I think he's good. Like,
guiding hand.
he kind of reminds me of like Ryan Miller at the end of his career,
Yes,
right? Like, not
that's
meant
a
to be
really
a
great
starter.
comparison. So like him signing in Buffalo for 2 years, I don't think it matters fantasy wise much.
No, well, if
I don't
anything, it says a lot about if they have someone else, like whoever else is the goalie, has an opportunity to be a volume starter. I think that's what it says for fantasy.
Yeah, but from the interview, what I heard and what I've gathered also is like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is going to be given an opportunity to take the job and run with it.
Well, yeah, but there's been updates since the interview. Well, all I know is like the GM of the Sabres, when they signed Anderson, was saying how like we're not done, and like I think they're planning on being active in the goalie market in the offseason. Like I don't think they want to go into the season with EPL and Anderson.
He said like they have no goalies right now, like at any level of their organization. Hunter in the chat is mentioning Levi, and like he was also in the conversation. I didn't get the sense that he was above UPL. But
Hunter Mooney in the chat here is saying he heard some.
Yeah, that would be really interesting if that's.
Who knows?
I'd be curious to hear which prospects guys have said that.
Link us, Hunter.
Yeah. So I think it's basically I think that means that the other guy, like, it's not. They have their ambassador player in place. They're like their team elder. He's going to look after. And so I think the other goaltending position, maybe it does indicate that, yeah, it's going to go to a young guy who might not be ready to run with it, who needs some growing. And hey, maybe UPL and Levi switch places at some point through the season. But I know that the Sabres have to like stock basically their entire organizational cupboard in net right now.
I hear you. I think if I was running the Sabres, tell me if this is a dumb idea. I feel like I would try my best. Obviously, it's hard, right? But I would try to get another goalie that's like could be like an NHL regular next season and split the net with Anderson and try to just get UPL and Levi to like, both play in the AHL or something and maybe be ready for a call up when someone gets injured. Like, I just feel like UPL's like barely had, like, he's been injured so much. Like, he doesn't need to like come in to the NHL. Like, I would be cool to just see him get a full like healthy season and maybe like come in at the end. So I don't know. And also I think the Sabres might be good. Like, I feel like they might have a chance to actually do something this season.
Yeah,
like, I like a lot of their players.
On that.
I mean, what? Like, we love Logan Thompson. Not Logan Thompson. He's the goalie for Vegas.
What?
Tage Thompson.
Yeah,
we love Tage Thompson. Like Skinner, Alex Tuck is someone we've been high on. They have all these like young players that are like kind of like seem like they're ready to take the next step. Like if Cousins can like obviously there's some ifs.
They have a line. They have a top line. They have like
I think they have two lines.
They have a developing second line. And like there's some pieces there, but I think there's still you like to get excited early about teams. And like I like that about you. I think it's early.
No, fair. No, most likely you're right. Like their odds of winning the cup, if you go to some gambling, are very low.
I would say their odds of making the playoffs are very low.
Yeah, but I think that I like them. I just feel like they have some good pieces in place, and I think like someone like an Owen Power is like probably ready already, to be like a big like impact player. And then they have Dahlin and Power.
Go ahead and name another another blue liner.
Exactly. Yoki Haru, is he still there?
Yoki Haru and Matthias Samuelsson are the only other defensemen under contract.
Well, they have like cap space, right?
Yeah, they have 35. They have 34 million. But now's not the time. They have three also. Sabres have 3 first rounders this year. They have their own Floridas and Vegases. They have 3 second rounders next year. With Phillies and Vegas's, like that's thanks Jack Eichel for that stuff. I think it's
unlikely. Okay,
it's about to be a fun time to follow the Sabres, but I think it is a fun time. I think
they should just like go with the young goalies this year,
like where the Sens have been over the last year or two. I think that's sort of the path they're heading out on.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a hunch they're going to try to get a good goalie, but we'll see what they do. All right, so we're a little late. So let's get the show on the road, I guess.
I was on time for the record.
No, I mean like this chat made us late. Not we started on time.
You started the chat.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's not a complaint.
I'm just saying I just let the record show.
You're coming in hot today.
I was here. I was ready.
No one ever says you weren't.
Sometimes someone says I wasn't.
So do you think it bothers people that I have this like microphone like pop filter in front of my face? Is that bad? Is this like
No.
people want to see my mouth? No, what do you need to see it for?
What's your mouth that has teeth?
Maybe they would think that I am like, not really podcasting, like
you're
I'm
like
faking
you're
it.
like lip syncing a podcast.
I'm Milli Vanilli. I have my friend that's doing it for me. All right. Oh, that's interesting. Hunter's saying he's high in New Jersey, but yeah, like it's like they need a goalie. Like Craig Anderson would be an improvement for them. Like if they get a good goalie, like watch out, right?
Yeah, I think you're pretty high on Craig Anderson.
No, I'm not that. I was just saying, like compared to the New Jersey guys. I'm not. Stop telling me I'm high on everybody.
I don't know.
You say it in this like condescending way.
No, I didn't mean to be condescending. We've had this like you.
I'm just saying that I think that New
you
Jersey
were
needs a
higher
goalie.
on Craig Anderson last year than I was, and you just said if New Jersey got Craig Anderson, look out. I'm like,
no, I said it. No, I said even Craig. No, you misunderstood. I said like even Craig Anderson would be a big improvement for them. I didn't mean like they need a good goalie. All right. Very good.
Excuse me.
You can
Are you mad that I sneeze?
you can probably turn the camera off for that. Someone's gonna screen cap that. Here it comes again. Get the camera off. Look, get out of this frame. Just duck down next time. Look at this guy falling apart. Okay, let's start the show. You're muted. I can't hear you, which is fine for me.
The other day, I wore like a collared button-up shirt that I hadn't worn in a while, like in a couple years. It was pretty tight on, like, there's less room than before.
Mm-hmm.
And I had allergies that day, and I kept like being about to sneeze, but because the shirt was so small, like, like the like the part before the sneeze, like my lungs like couldn't fill up, and like I didn't sneeze. It was like a sneeze suppressing shirt.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's start the show. Yeah, and obviously Shams is making good points that like the East is a really tough division to make the playoffs in, like no doubt. It would need to be a wild card, and that's tough too. All right, let's do this, Brian.
I like that it's news today that Jake DeBrusk didn't. I don't want to trade anymore. Who cares? You're Jake DeBrusk.
He had a good run last year.
He has a good run every year.
No, I don't know. Last year was I don't know.
Right.
I think I mentioned him in our Boston talk before. I was like, I think I would take him in with the last.
I were to ask you how long, game wise and chronologically, his run lasted last year.
A couple weeks.
So he had one run that was 9 days long in 5 games, and he had a separate run. Hang on.
I mean, like Boston's going into the season. Marchand is injured.
He had a separate run that was, let's see. Okay, this one was 12 days and 7 games.
I don't know. Don't be such a hater. It'll just this will be like awkward for you. Like you're doing this for no reason. And now one day someone will be able to take this clip when he has a good run.
I started by making fun of Jake DeBrusk for thinking anybody don't worry, I don't want to be traded. It's like, actually, like, okay.
I think there would be a market.
I would still want to trade Jake DeBrusk. Like, I don't care if your trade request is active or not. I'm shopping you.
So mean.
I think it's
Jake
cute.
DeBrusk. You hate him.
I don't hate him. So, you're mad at me for putting words in your mouth.
All right, let's start the show. I don't know how this is going to go today. I feel like we're not on the right page here, but let's just see how it goes.
You started nice. I started by complimenting you, telling you what a great friend you are.
Yeah, that was off the air. As soon as the camera went on, the teeth started to show. All right. Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who are really good friends, even though if you were watching the pre-show, it may not seem like it. I am your host, Elon Dubrovsky, and with me for the second half of our surprise party, where we're going to go through the other 16 teams in the NHL that we didn't cover, and for each team, talk about one player that surprised us more in fantasy than all the rest. It's my very good friend, like I said, the fantasy hockey robot, the poobah prognostication, the IPP MVP himself, Brian Com.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everyone. Here we are again, second time in a week coming at you, or second time in 2 weeks, however you measure time. We're here for you throughout the off season, which is, by the way, is just about to pick up. Very exciting. The draft is like just under 3 days away at the time of recording. That's going to give us a lot of new things to chew on. Maybe there'll be a trade at the draft. Maybe there'll be something else cool that happens. And then, of course, the dominoes will continue falling with, whatever other trades that happen before free agency, and then rosters take shape. Before you know it, we'll be drafting, and we're here to talk about the season that was and like tie a neat little bow around it so that we have everything we need from that season to take into next season and win our fantasy leagues.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be such a fun offseason. There's so many free agents that I'm interested to see where they're going to go. There has been one news item that came out. We've got one player off the board. A lot of people were wondering where Kevin Fiala was going to go. I'm sure Brian is a Sens fan, the classic every summer, thinking maybe the Sens are actually going to get one of these big names on the trade market in free agency. Obviously never happens, but it's fun that Sens fans like to, think about what it would be like to have a Kevin Fiala on their team. But of course, no, he got traded to the LA Kings for a pick and for a prospect defenseman named Brock Faber, who I hear is pretty good. But obviously we're not going to be giving our hot prospect takes here, but we can talk about Kevin Fiala quickly. So we'll do that. And then we're going to talk about these 16 teams. First, of course, let's mention that Keeping Karlsson is very proudly presented by DobberHockey.com. They, of course, 5 minutes after the trade? Maybe an hour, but right away you had your article about Kevin Fiala going to LA and the fantasy impact on both the Kings and Minnesota. That's the best side. Anytime there's anything that goes down, and there's going to be a lot going down, like Brian said, in the next little while, you want to check out DobberHockey.com. But Brian, why don't we get into it to start? And maybe we can start with the LA Kings side, because they bring in Fiala, kind of convenient. Dustin Brown is retiring. Not that Brown ended up kind of getting bumped off that Kopitar line for a while by the end of the year. I guess Iafallo had a run. He wasn't too effective. It seems like just such a perfect slot, right? Kopitar and Kempe looked really good. And now they get, I'm imagining, Kevin Fiala to slot right in there on the top line. I think this has got to be the best center that Fiala has played with. I don't know if you could think back to he was playing with, I guess, Rijo in Nashville, maybe. I know we talked a lot about the different centers he had in Minnesota. I guess it was Freddie Gaudreau, who was where he was having that big run with. And no disrespect to Freddie Gaudreau, but I think that was a lot of Kevin Fiala and maybe some Matt Boldy there that was helping Fiala go on that insane run where he seemed like he was scoring every single game. So I think it's a good spot at even strength. On the power play, I'd imagine he'll be up there. I don't know. I see this as good. The only thing that's makes me a little concerned is that LA is such a they're just a team that you don't expect a lot of offense from. But of course, this is a new play. This is Kevin Fiala, right? He's a goal scorer. He now is. They're trying to obviously change that reputation. And last year, Adrian Kempe scored, what is he, paced for 40 goals or something. So maybe Fiala can continue what he was doing. I don't know. I think it's a good thing, but let me know if I'm being too optimistic here.
I don't think you're being too optimistic. Los Angeles. Oh, sorry. I'm going to retake that because I wasn't ready. I don't think you're being unreasonably optimistic here, Elon. Like you said, LA has a defensive reputation, but I'm not sure I believe that. I think they've had to, based on the players that they've had available to them. But now, they were a middle of the pack team in goals scored last year. I think that's pretty good. For me, I'm happy to see that they're already starting to play a little more offensively. And I think this signals to us acquiring Kevin Fiala that, yeah, they're ready to add a legit top 6 scoring piece to help that top 6 along, which, by the way, I don't think has any more room in it, which is funny because I was just listening to Ben's interview. Is his name Andrew? Andrew Knoll. With Andrew Knoll about the LA Kings for our 32 beat series. And he's talking about so many interesting future options. You've got Byfield, you've got Kaliev, you've got Turcotte, you've got all the, and I think there's probably more I didn't mention, but really the top 6 now is solid. In fact, you're looking at somebody who was in the top 6 last year at times, Alex Iafallo, having no home there anymore because you're going to have Kopitar, Kempe, Fiala on the presumptive top line. And then you'll have Deneau, Moore, and Arvidsson on the presumptive second line. And there's really, I don't see anywhere to wiggle in there.
I mean, it's kind of funny. It's not I disagree, but it's look at this ascension for Trevor Moore that all of a sudden he goes from being a nobody to now we're I don't even see a spot. You're not going to bump Trevor Moore.
Andrew Knoll said that he's a duo.
He was good. Yeah.
He's a duo with Deneau that like Todd McClellan likes to play these pairs for the Kings. So Kopitar and Kempe are one pair, Deneau and Moore are another pair. And maybe that means Arvidsson and Fiala change spaces every so often to see who's the best fit with whichever other duo. But I thought that was a really interesting takeaway. By the way, so many of these interesting takeaways on these 32 beats. I know we were talking about it in the pre-show too. The Buffalo episode with Joe Yerdon, fantastic. It was also from Ben. So many good little nuggets that helped you get a really good understanding. So if you haven't been listening, I suggest you go back. But that's my takeaway for LA. I think Fiala's offense is going to be in good shape. Like he's playing with centermen. Like one of his problems recently in Minnesota was that he wasn't playing with anyone who could really handle their business on both sides of the ice. And now Kopitar and Deneau, both of those guys do it better than like 90% of the league. And Kopitar still got gas in the tank too. I did look back, Elon, when you asked who his best center ever was. Might have been Ryan Johansson in Nashville. He clicked the best with Freddie Gaudreau and Matt Boldy in Minnesota last season. But one year he did have Mikko Koivu, like retirement aged Mikko Koivu and Zach Parise, that's still worth something. But this is definitely going to be the best situation Fiala's ever found himself in, which to me, like, is going to be interesting to see. Hey, does this mean that we can get two halves of a good season from Kevin Fiala instead of just the one we've become accustomed to, or the very slow start? So I'm going to be watching, especially with the pressure of a contract and adjusting to a new team. This is a guy who's been traditionally a slow starter, and I think that concern that he's going to start slow because of those extra, off ice factors are very much in play now. So I am still going to be like, I'm going to have my radar up, but I'm still not thinking it's any more or less likely than he'd start slow this year than other years, because he's in a really great spot to produce. And I'm excited to see him be on a team that's going to use him in their top six. And I see him also on their top power play all through the year.
Yeah, you would think so. Obviously, unless he like has what, sometimes players go to a new team and then it doesn't click for whatever reason. But I mean, Kopitar is pretty good. I think of helping people click with him. I'd imagine, like, I'm not too worried. So obviously anything can happen. But yeah, I agree with you, Brian. Should be a good spot for him. Then yeah, maybe the Kings can try to copy what the Rangers were doing in the playoffs last year, like run a third line of all their young guys. Like they could have, Byfield centering like a Kaliev and I don't know who, Velarde. Or Turcotte,
yeah,
whoever.
We have all these
they
pieces who, like, they've been waiting on for a while. And again, listen to the interview, because Andrew has like a really great sort of view of the whole organization. They've had their time to develop. None of them have really developed yet, even though they're all still kind of interesting players. I think is Pinelli the guy they got last year too. Like there's a lot of names in the system, and it would just take one or two to step up to make that a really formidable and interesting third line. But before you say that the Kings can play like the Rangers could try to, although that line was really good, I think, in a lot of ways. But the Rangers, of course, had Shesterkin to fall back on if the line wasn't working out, which the Kings don't.
Yeah, well, we thought Cal Peterson maybe something close to that. Didn't look like it last year. We already talked about him actually in our part one of our surprise party here of talking about a surprise in each team. We were talking about how Cal Peterson was a big disappointment for the Kings. I guess on the other side of the deal, just quickly over in Minnesota, so they get Brock Faber. By the way, like LA trades Brock Faber, which, like I think he's a good prospect, but they already have Brandt Clark. Like it seems like the Kings like could afford to lose a defenseman. So I think it was just like a good piece of business for the Kings because they needed to bring in some firepower. Then they also signed, by the way, Fiala to a long-term contract, but nothing crazy. Was it like $7 million a year, something like that? 7.5. So anyways, now we go to Minnesota. My first thought was like, oh, it kind of stinks for Matt Boldy, right? Because he was like, came in and then all of a sudden was doing so well with Fiala, and maybe we didn't know exactly like, who gets more credit, or maybe they share the credit. But at the same time, I'm not going to be like too upset. Like Matt Boldy's like a prospect, like new to the league. Like, there's going to be other players in Minnesota for him to play with. Maybe Marco Rossi comes up and like they click together instead. I know that's like a center, not a winger, but it's like, I think Matt Boldy will be just fine. Maybe he works his way out to the top line at some point, like instead of Zuccarello. Like who knows, right? So I think overall in Minnesota, there's probably not too much I mean, Freddie Gaudreau, I guess, is probably the guy who's like already someone I wouldn't have been too excited about. But like, if the season would have started with like Boldy, Fiala, Gaudreau again, then yeah, Gaudreau was someone I added in my fantasy playoffs last year, and he was really useful. He did really well down the stretch. So if that exact line would have started the season, he would have probably been someone I would have grabbed out of free agency or taken with a final pick. But now, he doesn't have Fiala with him. Also, there already is the risk of like a Rossi or someone bumping him out of the top six. So I don't know. I don't have a huge fantasy take over in Minnesota. Let's see if you do.
No, I don't. Like my fancy take is actually first line or bust. Like with Fiala, like if you're drafting a wild player, you only want someone on the first line because with Fiala, there was going to be another productive line there when Fiala got his act together and could produce. And he brought, I think, like there was chemistry, no doubt, but I do think he brought Boldy and Gaudreau with him versus the other way around. Yeah, they work together to some extent too, but I think you subtract Fiala from that line, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, you have Boldy, Gaudreau, and I'm just looking at the default cap-friendly depth chart: Boldy, Freddie Gaudreau, and Brandon Duhaime. So it's like, there's not, and you look at the second line in Minnesota, and you've got, Joel Eriksson Ek, Jordan Greenway, Marcus Foligno. Like, there's not another really offensively minded player to step in for Fiala. This team almost looks like the Minnesota Wild that we've seen before, which is where, hey, first line, go out, do your damage, and every other line is going to hold the fort. And yeah, maybe you'll see Eriksson Ek and Foligno and hopefully Boldy and Gaudreau and Rossi be able to grind some scoring out, but it's going to be a little harder. And they don't have any cap space, right? They're feeling the effects of those huge contracts that they gave out to Ryan Suter and Zach Parise on that fateful day so many years ago now. What was it? Is it 10 years ago?
I think longer, but I don't know. You could do the math there. But yeah, it's not only the contracts they gave them, but also the fact they chose to buy them out for some short-term relief in exchange for long-term pain. I feel like, and obviously last season, Minnesota didn't go too far. So I guess in hindsight, maybe it would have been better to just keep Suter and Parise for another year instead of having to do this crazy buyout. Because yeah, they're going to have them on their books for a few more years now. So that's a shame. Hunter's bringing up a good point in the chat here, by the way. Like maybe you could say, oh, not so great for Boldy to lose Fiala as a line mate potentially. Well, definitely, unless he gets a better line mate. But he might have a better chance at the top power play now. Because if you recall, Boldy came in, he was on the top power play, he was doing great. Then at some point, Fiala ended up bumping him, and Boldy fell to second power play. And then sort of that hot run that he had when he first joined the league sort of cooled off. So, so that's what I'm saying. Like, don't get too freaked out. I think if you have Boldy in a dynasty league or something, I think he'll still be good next year.
I'm hoping that Boldy and Rossi can find each other and do something good together and bring in a third piece to produce with and be fantasy relevant. But I'm avoiding drafting off that Minnesota top line. There's not, like, I'm not excited. I wouldn't take any big swings. Like maybe unless it's, the final rounds of your draft, there really aren't very many forwards that I'm that interested in aside from Kaprizov, Hartman, and Zuccarello.
Right. I guess Hartman also. We'll have to see in training camp if he ends up sticking in that spot. But yeah, I don't disagree. Like, I definitely wouldn't leave Boldy undrafted. But yeah, it's not someone I'm going to like swing super big on because obviously it could be a big risk and you can maybe get a more reliable guy.
Boldy feels like the same level of swing as like this year as maybe Rossi was last year, or Puljujarvi or Bunting, someone in that category of late draft swings.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like some of them were really huge hits, like Bunting, and some of them ended up being misses. Like, well, Rossi, it's not really fair. He just like didn't play because he was injured and went to the minors. But yeah, okay. So that was fun. Now, Brian, let's get to our regularly planned and scheduled programming here, where we still have 16 teams to go, like you said, where we're going to put a bow on last season with one surprise from each team. Let me bring up we were doing a randomly generated order, so we didn't do our same boring old order that we've already done. So we've already covered Vegas, Seattle, Anaheim, Edmonton, Toronto, Boston, Detroit, LA, Florida, Chicago, the Islanders, the Sabres, the Blue Jackets, and the Hurricanes. And then we called Uncle and said, we'll do then we did Dallas, and then we did San Jose. And then we called Uncle and said, we're done for today, which leaves us 16 more to go. And we're going to start over in Montreal. If you recall, I'm saying to the listener here that the way we did it last week was Brian and I each prepared half the teams, so there's no guarantee of what order we're going to go in. But I'm looking right now at my doc, and Montreal was an Elon team. So who was my player on Montreal? Who was the biggest surprise? It's so hard. Montreal was a hard one because like they have a bunch of players that were like completely different players, like pre and post Martin St. Louis, right? Like Nick Suzuki was not doing anything. Like Cole Caulfield got sent to the minors. So if that's how the season would have ended, at the time that's MSL got hired, I'd be like, well, probably Cole Caulfield was the biggest surprise and like in a bust kind of way because he was supposed to be like a Calder candidate. Then he got sent to the minors. But of course, then Caulfield came in and was scoring so many goals. He was amazing. And Suzuki was great. So I'm going to go with a different name, which also is a guy that sort of followed the same pattern here in Jeff Petrie. But he was like so surprising in how bad he was. And then by how bad he was, it was so surprising that he was actually really decent at the end. So if we recall, if you look at your drafts from last year, especially in Bangers leagues, Jeff Petrie was getting drafted like super high amongst defensemen because it just seemed like, it was announced that Shea Weber was gone for sure. It was going to be Jeff Petrie for sure, top power play quarterback, which didn't end up happening even when Martin St. Louis got hired. But he was getting drafted super high because you knew he was going to get you points, like shots, hits, blocks, like across the board. And then he did nothing. He had like no points or no goals for like the first like 20 games. He became like basically dropped in every single league. He was available for me all over. And I actually grabbed him late in the season on my Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League team. And he did really well. So again, 6 points in his first 40 games. He had 21 points in his final 28 games. Like that's really, really good along with the peripherals he puts up, right? So I think people like just remember the stink and maybe don't recall how good he was at the end. So you could decide how you want to interpret this was he a bigger surprise as being so bad at the start or as a bigger surprise being so like not bad at the end. But overall, I'd be curious to know what happens next year, right? Because Chris Weidman is a UFA. Surprising that I have to say that as like a challenge, but Weidman was the one who was running the top power play in the second half of the year, most of the games when he wasn't healthy scratched. So it's possible Petrie gets back on the top power play. Even if he doesn't and he's only like a 40-ish point guy, that could be pretty sweet with all the peripherals. So Brian, I'm curious to know, are we like just forget about Jeff Petrie because he burned us so badly next year? Or is he like, oh, this guy might be a really good like sleeper that you're going to get later than you should, and if you just look at those end of year numbers, he could provide a lot of value, especially again in those Bangers leagues?
I think you need to proceed with caution around Jeff Petrie, and that's not just a comment on Jeff Petrie. That's a comment on Montreal as a whole being, kind of a challenging team to find offense on. And like you said, Elon, there was a bit of a burst towards the end of the season for everybody involved, thanks to the hiring of Martin St. Louis, but they weren't a dramatically better team. They just weren't as terrible as they had been. Like, this isn't to, do a disservice to St. Louis and the job he did behind the bench. Like, I think a change of voice, maybe someone who was more positive, optimistic, helped. And clearly Petrie was not coach's favorite before, right? Like he was inexplicably bumped out of a power play role that he'd been in Montreal for 4 years. And like, I don't think we got an explanation the whole way through. There's also a lot of talk through the season. Like, I'm sure when, if we're lucky enough to get Arpon Basu on our 32 Beats series again this summer, I would, we've talked about a lot of the players who had some off ice concerns and challenges that they were working through. I would not be surprised to hear Jeff Petrie spoken about in the same vein. I know at one point, even like the fans were on him because of something I think his wife posted on Instagram about not wanting to, that they interpreted as not wanting to be in Montreal. And he was just being considered this guy who was just sulking his way through the season, trying to get a trade, but doing nothing to raise his value. And anyway, it seemed really toxic for Petrie in Montreal off the ice this year. And that happens when you have such a terrible start to the year. But again, there were things that were done to him that also didn't seem to make sense. So it seemed like the team was trying to move on from him or put him in the doghouse, which is a strange thing to do to a veteran.
He was so bad, Brian. Like, if you watch some of those Habs games, he was like looking really bad at the start.
So it's like a chicken or egg, right? Was he bad because morale was down, or did morale go down because he was bad? It's just strange to see a season that we haven't seen from Jeff Petrie happen after so many years of consistency in Montreal. Again, 4 years of consistency, including one like huge season last year on a 63-point pace over 55 games. 63-point pace for an 82-game season, of course. To see things change when a player this late in his career, like he's entering his age 35 season. So that's another reason why I might say, maybe Jeff Petrie is going to not take the body quite as much this year, and slow down in some ways. I almost see him as maybe a Mark Giordano type, as he got older, is like, well, he can't do huge offensive things again. And then occasionally he would. But at the same time, his ice time and peripherals and fantasy value was kind of trending downward. So I was surprised by Petrie. I was more surprised. Well, I'd say I was equally surprised by how hot he got at the end, because before the huge season in 2021, like you could set your watch to him being a mid 40 point player, seeing half the power play time, and all of that went poof both the year before this year, where like he went way above and beyond that, and then it went poof in the other direction when he lost that deployment. So I'm checking the Cupful ADP from last season. He went just towards the end of the 4th round in most drafts, or beginning of the 5th. So 57th overall on average. The next like the defenseman picked behind Shea Theodore, Chris Letang, Aaron Ekblad, Quinn Hughes. I don't think he's quite with that group. I think he's probably dropped.
Take.
Yeah, I think he's probably dropped a tier or 2
or 5.
Yeah. He could be good value, right? He and Jacob Chychrun could both be good value if they can find their games and their deployment again. But deployment, like I keep saying this over and over, deployment is such a huge piece of this puzzle. And if I have no assurances that he's getting at least half the power play time back that he used to see, then I'm going to stay away unless bangers are really valuable.
I don't know. I mean, all I'll just say again is he had 21 points in his final 28 games, and that was without top power play, right?
Yeah, he had 3 power play points all season.
Yeah, so I just feel like, he's, again, not someone I'm taking like ahead of Aaron Ekblad, like our couple of participants did last year. But yeah, if I could get him as like my 3rd D, like on my team, like I'm going to feel pretty good about that. Like if I'm, because me, Brian, lately I've been proselytizing. What does that mean? That's like like telling people they should do something, right?
Pontificating. Yeah. Proselytizing is like spreading religion.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I wanted. I've been proselytizing in our Discord channel about how like maybe I don't want to grab D like so early in drafts if I can't get like Cale Makar, and maybe just let other people take the high end D, and I'll just like keep on grabbing. There's so many, like we're doing our patron rankings, by the way, which have been so fun on the Discord, and like we're like 30 plus players in, and there's still like superstar players. Like the NHL just has so many superstar players that I'd be excited to have in fantasy. Like Mika Zibanejad went at 28, like Jack Eichel went right before him, Johnny Gaudreau before him, like Jack Hughes before him. That's like 25 to 30. I'm telling you, these are like potential like 100+ point players, like, and that wouldn't be a swing at all, right? So I feel like I'd probably rather get guys like that and let other people take like a whatever, a Hedman or even like a Roman Josi or an Adam Fox, like who are like really awesome but just like don't have that ceiling, just get you so many points. And then if I end up with a Jeff Petrie as like my 3rd D, I'm not going to complain. But okay, that's probably a lot of Habs and Jeff Petrie talks. Let's go to our next team here. Oh, I should correct myself. It turns out Chris Weidman did get signed. I don't know how I missed that in the news cycle. I guess it was during like the Stanley Cup playoffs. Back at the beginning of June, he got a 2-year contract extension, almost league minimum. So obviously it's not as if they're putting like a huge, amount of faith in him with that contract. But hey, they're giving him the contract and he'll be there. So potentially he could still hold that top power play for what it's worth. I think if Montreal plans to contend, they could probably do a little bit better on that top power play. Let's go to St. Louis now, Brian. It's another Elon team. I just get to keep talking. So fun. Okay, so it would have for sure been Binnington, right? Like 3/4 of the way into the season. Like he was getting drafted as like a real, like, not like the highest end goalie, but someone you could just like set your watch to. He's going to be good. He's going to be the sure starter on like a good team. Like, no one was worried when they drafted Binnington in their fantasy leagues. And then they were like devastated when Ville Husso completely took over and Binnington barely played. And when he did play, he was terrible. So I think he would be the easy vote for the biggest surprise, but he did turn it around right at the end of the season and in the playoffs. And I guess Husso, like same on the flip side, right? He was so good. That was such a huge surprise. But then he sort of like cooled off and ended up losing his job. Then he got it back as Binnington got injured, but then he didn't even play so well. Now he'll be a UFA. So anyways, I'm going to like spare the listeners the goalie talk here because I'm not going to pick them. Then there's so many players that broke out, right? Like St. Louis is like stock full of players that were surprising and went like either above or below their, ADP from last year. Kyrou, Buchnevich, Rob Thomas, Tarasenko, all these guys were above point per game, and I don't think they were being drafted anywhere close to that. In the end, I'm going to pick Rob Thomas, okay? I think he's the most surprising, considering he had already played a couple years in the league. He only had 12 points in 33 games the season before, less than a half point per game. Almost like a point in only every three games, right? He had 42 points in 66 games before that. So it was definitely not something that I was expecting, that in his age 22 season, he would explode like he did. 20 goals, 76 points in 72 games, over a point per game. Obviously, like, this was like a huge increase in deployment. That is a big reason why Rob Thomas was able to, do so well. Like, obviously the coach just decided like he was ready to give Thomas the reins, and he got it. He was averaging 18 minutes and 46 seconds of ice time when his previous high was 14 minutes and 34 seconds. He also had 14 power play points from, I guess, like the second power play. Like, he's actually like it was in the cupful this past season in tier 1. He was dropped like a couple of times, and again, it was because like he had some stretches where he'd go cold, and when he would go cold, he'd give you like no fantasy points at all. Like, he wasn't like shooting that much or hitting or blocking. So he's like it was pretty rare to be able. I think I added him twice in the couple. Like, I added him at one point, then I dropped him, I added him again. This is like an over point per game guy, so that doesn't happen too much in fantasy. So now that we look towards next year, what do we do with this guy? Like, is he a point per game player? Seems like he had a bit of a high shooting percentage. I think I'd be nervous to draft him at the production he had last year, especially since when he doesn't get a point, like, he does nothing, which is a real big bummer. And so I feel like maybe I'd be more comfortable drafting him as like a 60 to 65 point guy, but I feel like that just means I'm not going to get him. So I'm curious to know if you think I'm dumb with that. Like, if I should just like kind of let someone else take Rob Thomas, because yeah, I'm just a little bit nervous that he'll be able to keep this up, even though he had such a great season.
That's fair. I think I also might not be ready to reach his high for Rob Thomas as some. And this isn't to take away from him at all. Like, he's someone who's been on our radar a couple of years, had a terrible season in 2021, just 12 points over 33 games. And the killer, as you got to, Elon, is in those 33 games in 2021, Robert Thomas had 22 shots. So every one out of every 3 games, he basically went without a shot, which is very frustrating. A lot of cardio shifts from Rob Thomas. But this year, it didn't matter because he was just putting pucks getting on the score sheet constantly. And one way was on the power play, which, yeah, I think he, like you mentioned, those 14 power play points. I think he got too many from the second unit. But another part where I raise an eyebrow is he had 3 shorthanded points this season, which is a really solid number. And one reason for that is because he had a shorthanded role for the first time in his career, a pretty substantial one. He saw about a third of the Blues' shorthanded minutes. And overall, he saw a 5-minute bump per night between even strength and power play and shorthanded responsibilities. So a really huge bump for Rob Thomas this year in deployment. And he responded. Can he do it again? I don't see something super promising that tells me he can. He had a huge on-ice shooting percentage on his line with Tarasenko and Buchnevich, which was around 13%. And that's usually not a number that sustains unless you're playing with someone really elite. And this is not to take away from Tarasenko and not to take away from Buchnevich, but neither of those guys is the level. Like, there's a small handful of players like Alex Ovechkin or Nathan McKinnon or Connor McDavid. Like, I'm talking your first round fantasy draft picks. Those are the guys who can drive an on-ice shooting percentage that actually sustains at being 13%. So that's one reason why I don't think Robert Thomas is going to be able to keep up his production quite as high. But that's not to say I don't think he's the real deal. Also, I mean, a big question mark coming into the season. I might have said if St. Louis was my team, the biggest surprise that Vladimir Tarasenko started the year and finished the year with St. Louis and had a successful year doing that. And I think I saw in an exit interview when the Blues were eliminated from the playoffs, they were asking, like, what's the deal with Tarasenko? Where are things at? And it sounded like they just squashed it. Like, that's behind us. We've moved on. When I'm pretty sure, I don't know if this exact word was used, but it seemed irreconcilable earlier in the season. Like, coming out of training camp, it seemed like a terrible situation. Everybody was mad. It was screwing with everyone on the team. And look at them now. So having Tarasenko back with Thomas and having Buchnevich back in another year of confidence, I'm not seeing all of this production disappearing, but I am going to think of him more like, Elon, you said 60, 65 points. I might go 65, 70.
Yeah, 65, 70, but with low periffs. So then, that probably
Yeah.
puts him among like your average 65-point guys who maybe like shoot a little bit more. So yeah, okay, I think we're on the same page there. Let's go next to Philly. Another Elon team. Oh, the Elon fans are having fun to start the show, Brian. Let's go to Philly, where there wasn't anyone that was that good. So this is not going to be a happy surprise. I'm trying to even think, like, if I was to pick a happy surprise on Philadelphia, like I don't know, JVR totally disappeared. I guess Cam Atkinson
Cam
had that.
Atkinson's
Yeah,
the
he
easy
was
one.
good.
I'm surprised you didn't go straight for it.
I mean, but it wasn't like so surprising. Like
You were so excited.
but excited isn't surprise. Yeah, he
True.
ended the season though with 50 points in 73 games. He had a really good run before like everyone around him got injured, and he just couldn't carry the load.
And
any
according
further.
to Charlie O'Connor, he was
Mhm.
also injured as well.
Of course,
Like
the
Cam
whole
Atkinson
team.
was playing hurt towards the end.
A note to any pending UFAs: I would recommend not signing with Philly, not because I don't think it's a good organization, but they're jinxed, and you're going to get hurt, and it's not going to be fun.
Maybe it's the medical staff.
It could be, yeah. Well, Ryan Ellis, we'll see what happens to him. That was obviously such a bummer that they got him. I guess that's a surprise. I mean, you can't put him for this podcast because he only played 4 games. But man, like they brought in this like top pairing defenseman, big plans, and then like just poof, gone for the year. So, all right, I'm gonna go with a negative surprise here, of course, and I think I'm gonna go with a player that people might even forget is on this team just because he missed a lot of last year, but he did play enough that I think we can talk about him. That's Sean Couturier. He was clearly playing injured. Charlie O'Connor said as much before he finally got shut down. But he only had 17 points in 29 games before getting shut down. This is a guy who previously, for the previous 3 seasons, was like 70-plus point guy. He even got up to 78 for a pace one of those years. So I feel like, on one hand, I could come out here and be like, everyone's forgotten about Sean Couturier. This is going to be your opportunity in fantasy to get like a cheap Sean Couturier, 70-plus point player.
You should stop there.
Well, I'm going to keep going.
No, don't say the second half.
Why? Because you want to say it?
No, because I think the first half is correct. I don't think you need the but.
Well,
Like
I'm just going to say it and then you could correct it. I am a little bit concerned that, those big seasons came with a lot of power play points on a power play with Claude Giroux, who is gone. Like, so he might have worse players around him. I think like Giroux was like a really awesome player. And I think that power play where Sean Couturier got so many points is not going to be as good. Like, who's the person coming in to take his spot? You know what I mean? So anyways, that would be my concern, unless you're going to tell me that like an Owen Tippett or, I don't know, one of their new young players is going to come up and like be really good. But yeah, anyways, I still think Sean Couturier will be a value pick, but may not be like as sure thing for 70-plus points just because the team around him is looking really weak. We'll see what they do in the offseason, of course. Maybe they sign Johnny Gaudreau and then we could be a little bit less concerned.
Well, listening again to the 32 Beats interviews with Charlie O'Connor for the Flyers, it didn't sound like that should be a really high priority for Philly. Like they're going into a bit of a rebuild. This is not the time. Like they could try and add a top 6 piece and see what happens, but I'm not expecting Sean Couturier to get any immediate help. But the thing is that I also don't think he needs any immediate help, which is why I've loved Sean Couturier. I think my one concern at this point would be like injuries, right?
Right,
like
of course, that too.
Like he's missed most of the last 2 seasons, and the season before that, he missed 13 games, which isn't a ton, but is nothing. He's been hurt a lot over the last few years. So that would be what would be holding me back from taking a big flyer, no pun intended, on Sean Couturier. But I think he's someone who's going to fall. He fell to me in drafts this year, actually. I had him in almost every league I was in, and I paid for it in almost every league I was in because of the injuries. But I have a feeling that I'm going to be ready to draft him again a little bit ahead of where everyone else is. Elon, you're right. Like he doesn't have Giroux or Voracek to work with, who he had some really successful seasons with. But yeah, I actually don't know if I have a but on the other side of that. I wanted to say, but you're right. It's looking pretty ugly on that Philly depth chart. And I don't think Owen Tippett is the answer. I think Cam Atkinson is a player. I think he's legit. And JVR, like Couturier with JVR and Atkinson, sure. I
I
think
don't
that could
know.
work.
JVR seems kind of, anyway, we'll wait and see.
Or Konechny, who I
Who
won't
just
spoil
injured
the
him?
interview.
He just injured himself, unfortunately. Apparently, he was like working out. I didn't get like the full
Oh.
details, but apparently he's like hurt now from like a workout. So I don't even know if he's going to start the season.
Bad news bears over here.
I know, terrible.
Over in Philly. So and also, by the way, Elon, I thought you might go Martin Jones as a happy surprise in
He was-
Philly. Like
I mean,
if you're searching for a happy surprise, that's
what was the save percentage in the end? Like
it was
902.
900. It was his highest save percentage in 4 years.
Yeah, he was like not a guaranteed loss every game he was playing. Like I would have maybe
that was
expected him to
surprising.
be.
Do you know actually if there's one consistent goalie in the league, and I didn't realize this until just now, Martin Jones was exactly an 896 goalie for 3 consecutive seasons on the dot. That's wild.
That's how you get your contract bought out.
If you don't know who this guy is, like if you don't know who Martin Jones is, you just have to believe him in what he shows you.
All right, so let's go next. We've done. Is it going to be another Elon team? Or are we going to go to a Brian team? We're going to the Rangers.
It's still you.
Oh boy. Okay, let's see. You know what? I wrote this. Normally, I prep the shows the night before, then we record the show. Last week, the plan was to do all the teams in one show. So I'm like surprising myself here with what I wrote because I didn't get a chance to look over the notes today. Okay, the Rangers, I wrote, obviously Chris Kreider. I'm not going to even like name any other players. He's the obvious answer. Anyone who has another answer is wrong. No one called that this was going to be a 50-plus goal scorer. And he scored 52 goals, 25 assists in 81 games. We just talked about him recently on a Patreon cast about his season, but it's just like this guy, you could talk about him on multiple shows, right? It was such an amazing season. And obviously now it's very interesting to try to figure out if he'll be able to do it again. His previous career high was only 28 goals. I'd imagine like this is the easiest hedge to make, right? I'll say like he probably won't be the same. But also I could see him being really good still. Like if his previous career high was 28 goals, this season he scored 52. Maybe he lands next year around like a 35 to 40 goal score, which is still like super valuable in fantasy. So I think he's the kind of player who is going to, I don't even know if he's going to get drafted too high. I'm very curious to see what his ADP will be because I don't think anyone believes in him as a 50 goal scorer. Like I'll be happy to be proven incorrect on that, and maybe he can keep it up again. But like it's just hard. Like someone who's had such a long career to come out of nowhere and have like such a breakout. I feel like it's unlikely he'll be able to sustain it unless he's like found a completely new part of his game. Like I guess he did have stretches in the past in his career where he would go on runs of scoring all the time, but then he would go quiet. So maybe he found some consistency. So yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna call him for like 38 goals. If I'm doing projections for next year, I'm gonna call him for like 38 goals and I don't know, maybe 35 assists. Where does that land him? So around 70 points. I don't know. What do you think, Brian?
Good math. Yeah, I think that's about where I'll put him to. I mean, you've heard me all season talking about how he's shooting unsustainably on the power play. 40% shooting on the power play with the man advantage for the Rangers. And last year, his shooting was also pretty high, 27% on the power play. So he's found something that works for him. And this isn't so like he can peak at about the 20, maybe 25% shooting percentage, like conversion rate on the power play, but I wouldn't expect him to sustainably do more. One thing that I do like that he is doing more of is shooting at 5-on-5 and on the power play. It's like the more he scored, the more the Rangers are like, yeah, keep shooting. Or in his case on the power play, that they'd keep shooting to set him up for rebounds or deflections or whatever he was doing around the net to score 26 power play goals. Another interesting part added to Kreider's game this year was like Rob Thomas. He's playing shorthanded for the first time in his career, playing again about a third of the Rangers' minutes on the penalty kill. And he put up 3 shorthanded points on the penalty kill too. And we've talked on the show over the last couple of years. I think we had Megan Hall on the show, who was the first one to sort of start talking about the power kill and like introduce the term to us. And now it's out there. It's pretty common. I see Shayna Goldman use it a lot too, as being like, it's becoming a trend for NHL teams to put skilled star players on the penalty kill because there are some moments where you can really try and jump on and exploit a team being on the power play, not being as defensively responsible. Like, yeah, are you leaving yourself a little more defensively vulnerable? Sure. But, one skip of the puck on the ice or one botched pass or one slip at the blue line by the defenseman, and you have one of your best scorers on your team heading in like 1-on-0 or 2-on-1 against the other team's goalie shorthanded. So like these aren't world beating totals, 3 shorthanded points from Thomas and Kreider, but they are like, that's high. That is high shorthanded production, especially from Chris Kreider, who had never had a shorthanded point in his life, which is almost a 10-year career up until now. So a huge breakup from Kreider, someone who'd been like historically very streaky, very frustrating as a fantasy player because he'd produce like a 70-point player some weeks, 30-point player other weeks, and it was sort of swing back and forth without any consistency. I'm not expecting him to continue 50-goal, 80-point pace consistently, but I am hoping, especially with more responsibility and more shooting, that he can stay up above the 60-point range, which is not what we've ever been able to rely on him for. So I would be breaking new ground.
Right. Well, breaking new ground for a second time.
Yeah, exactly.
Breaking the same ground again. So I guess we'll see where he gets drafted. And yeah, it looks like Brian and I won't be getting him in our leagues because probably someone else will take him, hoping for a repeat. So it'll be fun to see what happens with him. And also, like, I'm not, not putting out the question. Maybe he can get that high power play shooting percentage again. But yeah, I agree with you, Brian. That seems a little unlikely. But of course, congrats on a great season. Our good friend Go Hollywood in the chat here, I feel like we haven't seen in a while. How you doing? Mentioned like maybe like a Lafreniere or Kakko as like could have also been listed as like disappointments. So we were hoping maybe this could be the year that they break out. Didn't happen. We'll see next year. Maybe it's like Lafreniere. Like I don't know. What was the take I said to you earlier that you like scoffed? Oh yeah, I said I would take Bordelot over Lafreniere. Yeah, I'll be curious to see now if I'm correct about that one.
Well, you've already sort of thrown in the towel on it, if I remember correctly.
Like I already think that Lafreniere is better than Bordelot. I think Bordelot's going to be good. We'll see. We'll see how it goes next year.
So you'd backed off saying that Bordelot was gonna. Are you backing back on?
I'm saying like I didn't mean to say it like I guarantee you Bordelot is going to be better than Lafreniere. I was just saying when we were talking about
it was a hot take. Are you standing by? Are you going back to it? Or
what does it mean to like stand by it or go like how, are you asking me how confident I am? I think I'm more confident than I should be for a first round pick over first overall versus a second round pick, right?
Okay.
So, but yeah, I'd still bet Lafreniere if I had to let you put a gun to my head.
Okay. Well, I would never do that to you.
I would appreciate that. Yeah, that would be scary.
Yeah.
I think that would be the end of the podcast.
Can you imagine? That would be really interesting content.
0 strikes and you're out on that one, or 1 strike you're out. Like I'm not giving you a redo. But okay, let's go to the next team. I'm going to try to talk quieter. I just got a message from my wife saying that I'm yelling like so loud she could hear me. We just moved to a house a couple months ago, and she's like telling me that she's all the way downstairs and she could hear me yelling. So let me know if this like totally ruins the podcast if I go with a bit of a more normal voice. As we go to our next team, the Ottawa Senators. Finally, it's Brian's time to shine. And of course, we will get to all of Brian's fun Ottawa takes in just a sec. But first, let's take a quick break. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson. All right, we are back. Brian, the floor is yours. Who was the biggest surprise on the Ottawa Senators, your favorite team in the whole wide world?
I feel like New Age Elon is narrating like a soothing self-help audiobook.
Is this terrible?
No, it's noticeable, but I like it. It's good. You're like relaxing me instead of riling me up.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, we'll see what the feedback is.
Okay, so Ottawa, they're my team. I want to call Ottawa, the whole team, a surprise. I really do. No one, the most faithful or optimistic Sens fan, I don't think would have expected. Like, I believed that Drake Batherson was a good hockey player. He had a 50-point pace in 2021. That was his first full-ish season. He played 56 games. Pretty good. I was expecting him to take another small step forward. But holy cow, this season, Drake Batherson, 46 points and 44. Sorry. Drake Batherson, 44 points with 17 goals in 46 games for a 78-point pace, putting up 2.5 shots per game. Just huge production. And of course, derailed at his hottest moment by Aaron Dell doing what he did. I can't even start to get into that, or I'm going to sound like first half of the show Elon. And then you have beyond Drake Batherson, that's one surprise in the degree to which he popped off. Josh Norris too, also like Batherson last season in 2021, 51-point pace, nothing special, and his first sort of repeated exposure to the role that the Sens hoped he could take on one day. And then this year, again, a switch flips. 35 goals and 55 points in 66 pay. 35 goals and 55 points in 66 games, falling just under 70-point pace. And like Batherson putting up 2.5 shots per game. So I thought both of these performances were hugely surprising, especially like for me, because Josh Norris, you might remember, was a key piece in the return for the Erik Karlsson to San Jose trade. And since that moment, I've just been like, forget it. Like this guy, it wasn't worth it. It was a bad deal. And I heard like the rumblings that he could be good. And he actually started off with a lot less hype and buzz around him. And it's slowly been growing as he's developed in Ottawa. And you could sort of see something coming. But again, like Batherson, not this. So huge point paces. Batherson 80-point pace, Norris 70-point pace. I'm cheating here because I'm going to add a third surprise in Anton Forsberg, who was a 7th-round pick of Columbus back in 2011. Okay, this is over a decade ago. Anton Forsberg was drafted. Since then, he's had a 902 save percentage, 44% quality starts, only 50 starts over the last 6 seasons. 35 of those came in 1 year with Chicago when he was age 25. Only 11 games since the 17-18 season. Anton Forsberg steps into the net, age 29, 4 years later, gets 44 starts and has a 917 save percentage, 66% quality starts, and the best season compared to his expected save percentage of his career. The first time it's looked respectable. So just surprises left, right, and center for Ottawa. And I'm hoping that there are more to come. But I don't know, Elon, if you find one of these more surprising than the others, but I sort of just had them all as being really incredible breakouts.
Yeah, no, it is hard to choose between them. We were talking in our Patreon, the thing with the rankings that we're doing every day is like, not only do we just pick players, we're also like discussing them as we go. And we were kind of thinking like, who's a player who next year is going to be like a big jumper, like someone who's not going to get ranked as high this year as they get ranked next year. And like someone like Drake Batherson really jumped to mind for me. Like this might be the last year where you could get him like decently late in your draft. And if he could keep up what he did last year, like he could be like a star in fantasy. And then, yeah, Anton Forsberg, I've already like, I'm blowing my chances now because probably all my competitors are listening, but he's someone I would love to get in fantasy next year. If I could like not pick goalies, again, this is like kind of my thing. I want to just get all the best forwards. And then if I could still end up with decent goalies and defensemen, I don't need superstars, but just solid goalies and defensemen later in the draft, I could feel really good about my team. And then maybe also hope to get one, like a good goalie out of free agency or whatever. But like someone like an Anton Forsberg was an MVP for me in in my like main Keeping Karlsson league in the playoffs. And I feel like he's someone that's still going to fall in drafts because he's Anton Forsberg, but I have like no concerns about Matt Murray. I imagine he'll just get injured sometime soon. Forsberg's probably going to be a decently volume goalie. At least that's what I'm banking on. And I think Ottawa's looking like they're going to be better. So I think, yeah, he'd be a really good bet for next year. If I had to pick a disappointment, Brian, what do you think about Brady Tkachuk? Because he was someone that last year in fantasy drafts was going like at the end of the first round. People were like falling over themselves to get Tkachuk in like bangers leagues because he shoots so much, he hits so much. Then in our patron rankings, I guess I'm talking about that a lot. By the way, super huge kudos to Andrea and Joel who've been running it every single day. And also get well soon, Andrea. She had a bike accident recently, and we're wishing you all the best, Andrea. But yeah, so it was back to these awesome rankings and polls that they've been running every day. Brady Tkachuk fell, right? He went 18 this year when he was 13 last year. Maybe that's just more to do with like so many good players jumping up that we had to fit them in, like Shesterkin, all of a sudden is jumping into the top 10 like a Mitch Martin, or I don't know. But like I'm curious just to see, like I think that like Tkachuk's 30 goals this year were good, but like I think there was a time maybe last year people were thinking like this was going to be the year where he breaks out and scores like 40, and he didn't score 40, he scored 30. So I don't know if it's not like a huge disappointment. It's not as much of a disappointment as like Anton Forsberg or Batherson or Norris were surprises, but I'm curious to get your take if like you think what we saw last year from like Tkachuk is like just like kind of what to expect moving forward. Don't expect more than like a 30 goal, 70-point guy with great peripherals.
It's tempting, right? We can't tease apart exactly what happened with Tkachuk this year. Like he did play 79 games, but that erases the fact that he missed training camp because of a contract, a whole dispute. And then it took him, once he rejoined the team, it took him a couple, I would say it took him honestly a month as someone who had him on his fantasy team. I watched Brady Tkachuk wait to find his legs, and all of that data is mixed in with the rest of the data from the season that we have on Brady Tkachuk, which by many accounts, a 70-point season, that's a career high for him, right? Like he'd only ever paced for 53 points at best. 51, 52, 53 points in the 3 seasons before this one. So it's funny to frame this as a negative surprise, but I understand what you're saying, that you thought the breakout would go straight from being, like a 25 goal scorer to a 40 goal scorer, and he's taken a step to 30 along the way. And I still think that it is just a step. Like I do see some reason to think, maybe not. Like his expected goals rates were lower this year than they ever have been in his career. He took fewer shots, but again, I really do think a lot of that is colored by the initial sort of stretch that he was not quite up to full speed for. So I'm not giving up on Brady Tkachuk as a 40 goal scorer. I understand your disappointment if you were ready for it to happen already, but I wouldn't be so mad that he didn't make the jump immediately in his age, 22 season this year.
Yeah, Brian, guess what? I agree with you.
Age 21 season.
I just wanted to bring it up because I saw that he fell. Sorry, do you want me to keep that in?
Oh, okay, sorry. It was his age 22 season.
Okay, so good.
Yeah.
You know what, Brian? I agree with you. I brought it up because I saw that he fell in the rankings, and he only fell 5 spots. And when you're that high, that's pretty significant to go from 13 to 18. So I wanted to bring up, but I agree with you. I think that he's might be a really good value. You're still gonna have to take him as a second round pick, but if you have a late second and he falls to you, imagine if you got like Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon or whatever, like right at the top of the draft, and then it snakes all the way around, and then you could get Brady Tkachuk right at the end of the second. I think you're setting up a pretty nice fantasy team to start yourself off in a Bankers League, of course. So yeah, I think that people in the chat are also saying, like Hunter's saying, that he was missing Batherson and Norris for almost a month as well. So there were a lot of factors that maybe took away from his potential upside. Yeah,
we did talk about that on the show when they were out of the lineup and there were no points coming and the sky was falling for Brady Tkachuk. Thank you for reminding me of that moment, because that just adds fuel to my fire, which is also yours, Elon. Good to hear.
Okay, let's go next to Washington. It's another Brian team. Who was the biggest surprise to you over in the nation's capital down south?
This is off mic. I got it. You sound less excited. I'm just gonna say you sound like you said to all the folks out there in Radio Land.
Okay, I'm giving it a try.
Yeah, give it a try. We'll see how it comes out.
Maybe I'll buy some soundproofing material before. Should I make a? Okay, whatever. Okay, before things happen. All right, go ahead.
Okay. Washington. Okay, so I will say that one negative surprise in Washington was Anthony Mantha really just not getting any opportunity to do much at all. And this is also like a chicken or egg thing, because I'm not sure he earned the opportunity to do anything at all. We used to cry about his deployment in Detroit. We hadn't seen nothing yet. He saw a career low 15 minutes of ice time per night, career low share of power play time, and that was all part of contributing to I'm going to call it the worst season of his career. He had just a 51-point pace, 9 goals, 14 assists for 23 points in 37 games. Yes, he hasn't done as well in previous years, but he was still growing. We didn't expect it. And also this season, Anthony Mantha's shot rates fell. Probably because of the time on ice he was playing, but he was down to just barely 2 shots per game, which is about in line with the worst season he's had before. The guy turns 28 in September. I'd love to believe a breakout is still on the horizon. This is a guy who had back-to-back seasons where he had a 60-point and then a 72-point pace, and then has fallen off the face of the earth since. So we'll see if this guy's got anything in him. I don't know if I think I'd be more surprised to see him bust out and show that potential than to see him wallow where he is again. But that was a negative surprise, that not that he did so poorly, but that he played himself. Like, he was buried in Detroit. He's in the doghouse forever. And it's like he arrived in the doghouse in Washington. So that was a bummer. But that would be my negative surprise. I like how this is supposed to be one surprise, but we're naming so many per team. My big surprise in Washington might not be an obvious one, but it might be so obvious. Alex freaking Ovechkin is my big surprise in Washington this season. You can call me a non-believer. No, go ahead. But I think everyone should be surprised by the season that Ovechkin had, because Elon, this was not just him keeping up with what he'd done before for another year. Alex Ovechkin put up his best point pace in nearly a decade. Not since the lockout shortened season in 2012-13, when Ovechkin had 56 points in 48 games. He'd never put up a point pace north of 90 points since then. And in a full 82 game year, Ovechkin hadn't put up a point pace above 90 points since 2009, 2010, his third year in the league. So now Ovechkin, this graybeard, in his age 36 season, he puts up a 96 point pace. I'm calling that a surprise. 50 goals, 40 assists for 90 points in 77 games, taking about 4.5 shots per game, basically equaling or besting almost every season he's ever had in terms of actually scoring goals too. Like, Ovechkin has been in the league 17 years. He's 36 years old. And at this point, it's comical that when Ovi is like suddenly surging to levels we haven't seen in a decade or more. But the funnier part is that the league, like NHL, you've had 17 years to figure out how to stop this guy. He's 36 years old and he's still doing it to you.
Don't blame the other people. Ovechkin's just too good.
There's an entire, which is all incredible. Like, there's an entire career's worth of tape on Ovechkin that teams can look at and tendencies to strategize around. Everyone knows how good he is, and no one can find a way to stop him, especially on the power play this season. Ovechkin had 29 power play points with 16 power play goals. And really, if I'm looking to see how else he got to that 96 point pace, nothing stands out from the other seasons. Like, no weird variance or anything, which is a huge compliment to him. Like, there is some decline visible in the attempts and shots he's generating per 60 minutes, but for Ovechkin's age and stage, he just keeps rolling. And so I'm blown away that Ovechkin not just kept up what he's done before, but hit this high water mark that it's been a while since we've seen him there, and doing it at age 36. And Elon, I'm going to put the question to you. What would be more surprising next year? If Ovechkin kept this up again in his age 37 season, or finally took a step back?
Step back would be more surprising. I feel like I love the Ovechkin talk. I'm never going to say to not talk about how great he's been playing. He's an amazing player for sure, one of my favorites. But come on, this is the wrong answer, because you shouldn't be surprised. Ovechkin is he's the best.
80 point pace, Elon, 85 point pace. I'm not surprised.
All right. Well, I respect it. Unfortunately, Brian, it is the wrong answer. The correct answer was Evgeny Kuznetsov, easily.
You just want, we can't talk about Evgeny Kuznetsov enough for you on keeping Karlsson this year.
No,
from your auction draft moment.
No, I'm not even going to talk about myself. I'm just going to say, just to remind people, that going into the season, he was getting drafted super late, including $1 or $2 in Tier 1 Sweden, and for good reason. He only had 29 points in 41 games in 2020 and 2021, and then all of a sudden, he was a point per game player last year. He was unbelievable, centering Ovechkin the whole time. People at some point were worried when Nicholas Backstrom came back from injury that, oh no, like, is Kuznetsov finally going to lose his spot with Ovi? Didn't happen. Kuznetsov stuck with him. I'm not worried. Like, I think he's going to probably keep it up next year, just like I think Ovi will keep it, like, to some extent, right? Like, maybe there's like 5-point fall off for both of them, but I definitely think that Kuznetsov was the one that surprised. Like, I wasn't like every night just being like, oh my God, Ovechkin keeps scoring. How is this happening? But like with Kuznetsov a little bit, I was like, wow, this is really like a lot more than even I was expecting as someone who drafted him. But okay, so that's Washington. We're done with the capital teams. So now we can go to the Nashville Predators, our 23rd team in this series. Brian, who has Nashville? It looks like it's you. Who's it? I think I know the answer here.
Yeah, I think it's Matt Duchene. I'm not even going to keep anyone in suspense here. Like, Duchene, after 2 years, brutal regression, and also next to no power play production. You know, we couldn't tell if coming into this season, Duchene was washed or just incredibly unlucky. We actually couldn't figure it out. Like, there wasn't any clear, like, he had some really bad variants, but he's also slowing down in what he did himself. So it was really hard to tell what was causing what. So maybe this season, Duchene gave us our answer when everything in Nashville looked like it was working properly, including that power play, while Duchene put up 43 point. while Duchesne put up 43 goals with 43 assists for 86 points in 78 games, 29 power play points, 3 shots per game. It looks to me now like Duchesne was maybe just incredibly unlucky. Like, I remember earlier thinking it must be luck that Duchesne was actually going this hard. And there was some luck. Like, his on-ice shooting percentage of 5-on-5 was kind of high. But really, I think a lot of this was real more than it wasn't. And that's very much thanks to 16 power play goals, where Duchesne was just an incredibly dangerous shooter, seeing legit top power play time for, Elon, would you believe me if I told you it's been almost a decade since Matt Duchesne was consistently in a top power play role?
Even in Ottawa in that year when he was above point per game?
Yeah. I think that season is also colored by him having been traded to Columbus, where they didn't use him in the same role. Like, one year he came from Colorado, the next year he went to Columbus. So yeah, okay, that year in Ottawa is kind of the outlier when he was in Ottawa. You got me.
But it didn't last long.
But the rest of it, yeah, 10 years outside of that 1 year, Duchesne hadn't been seeing top power play deployment, which is amazing. So I think that, like, this massive cloud of bad luck over Matt Duchesne from past years has finally moved away. Plus, he's had more opportunity than he's had since his 4th season in the league at age 22, back in that lockout shortened season in 2012-13. Duchesne waited until age 31 to get another real crack at being a legit top line, top power play guy for a full season. And boy, did he make the most of it, and without having all the crummy luck he's had to his game before that. So I would say that it's unfortunate that it was a surprise for Matt Duchesne, because I think this talent has just been latent there the whole time, but just hasn't been able to really show. So there it is. Matt Duchesne showed, and we're surprised. But honestly, I wouldn't be so surprised to see him repeat this season.
I guess the thing with Nashville is I'm just a little worried if Philip Forsberg goes. It's kind of like what I was saying before about who was it that you were like, like Couturier, and I was like worried that maybe with Giroux gone, and I feel like it might be a similar situation. So we'll have to see what happens in the offseason, but I could see Nashville maybe falling off a little bit, which would obviously not be good for Duchesne. It also wouldn't be good for Roman Josi. Who is like really funny. I just got to bring him up because he, back in 2019-20, had a 77-point pace, right? 65 points in 69 games. Then he fell off a little bit in 2020-21. And then this past year, like, totally exploded. If you look at our patron rankings, we've been keeping track of not only this past year's change from the previous year, but also from the year before. And Roman Josi went down 17 spots. Sorry, he went down 17 spots after the down year, and now he's like right back up the same 17 spots, back up to number 15, like where we ranked him 2 years ago. So he's just been yo-yoing up and down our rankings as he has good and bad seasons. So hopefully for him, the pattern doesn't continue and he falls those 15 spots again. Not that a 56-point defenseman is bad, but after he put up a 98-point pace. Can you believe Roman Josi had a 98-point pace this season? But it just feels like it's going to be tough for him to repeat. And I think, like I was saying with Duchesne, I just would be a little worried about this team maybe regressing, as Shane is agreeing with me in the chat. We'll have to see if someone like Tomasino or Eli Tolvanen, who people were into at the start of the year, then he totally, actually in the chat here, who said it? Go Hollywood said that Tolvanen duded out, which I don't even really know that saying. I'm wondering if it's a Big Lebowski reference, but whatever that means, yeah, he disappointed us for sure. So, Brian, when you say that you think Duchesne could keep it up again, I know that this is your faith in Duchesne as a player, but just in general, what do you think about Nashville? Like, are you a little worried? And we have to see what happens with Forsberg, right? And if they replace him, if he goes. Yeah,
there's a big asterisk to the comment that Duchesne can do it again, because it does. I think he needs Forsberg both at 5-on-5, but maybe especially on the power play to be able to put up that many points. And there's no clear heir apparent. You look up and down the roster, you've got your boy Philip Tomasino, Elon, who maybe could be closer to taking a step. I don't think Tanner Jeannot is going to be that top line talent that can really fill in. Ali Tolvanen duded out. Whatever, for making sure that the meaning of that means disappointed us and sort of disappeared. So yeah, I would be concerned if that top line is not together again in Nashville. Then I'm definitely downgrading Duchesne a fair amount. Actually, I'm not going to I'm not just going to dock him 5 or 10 points. I'm going to take him far below point per game pace. Like I would say without Philip Forsberg, it's just Granlund, Duchesne, and some guy on the top line.
Johansson.
Well, Johansson centers the second line.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes he goes up, but yeah, it wouldn't be as exciting for sure. All right, Brian.
And
Next
Johansson
up
is kind of some guy too, so Duchesne would not be nearly as interesting to me.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Brian, next up is the Calgary Flames. Once again, we're going to you. What are you going to do over in? Oh man, what is it called? Not Cowtown. That's like another city, right?
No, I think it's Cowtown.
That's Cowtown. Okay,
Yeah.
what are you going to do in Cowtown? By the way, I want everyone to know I'm really excited to be doing the show. I'm trying out a new voice, but the excitement, I feel like it's not coming across. I'm having a great time here.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm not. I realize how much I need your
energy. Maybe I can bring you higher with
Well,
this. By the way, Go Hollywood is saying he meant dudded out.
I'm gonna try. Well, now it's duded out. We're gonna go.
I was thinking like the dude in Big Lebowski. You know, he's just sort of like chilling, like
yeah,
drinking
me
his
too.
White Russian, like smoking a joint.
That's exactly how I read it too. Like, oh, he was too busy being a dude. Dude,
just out. Like they pass it to him and he misses the net, and they're like, "Ellie, what's going on?" He's like, "Whatever, man. Like, it's cool. Calm down."
Okay.
Right. Calgary.
Cowtown. I'm going to say my big surprise in Calgary from this past season is Johnny Gaudreau. After basically 6 years of whiplash and alternating between 60-something and 80-something point paces, including that one massive 99-point campaign, Gaudreau wasn't just this year that makes him the surprise for me. It's that this was the second consecutive year. Oh, actually, sorry. Let me start over. I'm going to start that over. All right, in Calgary, I'm going to go with Johnny Gaudreau as my surprising player. And yeah, I know. Everyone's like, what? You were surprised by that? I want you to tell your September 2021.
This is not an Ovechkin thing. I think it's fair to be surprised by Gaudreau's season.
Well, he's a guy in my mind where I'm like, I was surprised by how great Johnny Gaudreau was this year. I'm like, well, but we've seen him be this good before. But really, I mean, it's been 6 years of a roller coaster following Gaudreau's point totals between being a 60-something and an 80-something point player. And he had that one huge 99-point campaign. And then finally, it looked like Gaudreau had settled in the 2 years before this past season. Gaudreau had settled pacing for 68 and 70 points respectively. It was the first time in his career, in Gaudreau's career, where he'd had similar point paces in back-to-back seasons. So, of course, that couldn't last. That was too consistent for Johnny Gaudreau, and he exploded in the right direction for a career-high 115 points. 40 goals in his age 28 season. A huge reason for that, I think, was trading out Sean Monahan for Matthew Tkachuk as a line mate. That was massive for him. And, you know, that line one with Elias Lindholm just went off all year long, not to mention that top power play unit in Calgary didn't feature Monahan as much as it had in the past. And, you know, this isn't to shade Sean Monahan, but Johnny Gaudreau seemed much better off being without him than with him. So how did Gaudreau do all this? Well, at 5-on-5, he had a 13% on-ice shooting percentage, which is high. But the way that top line in Calgary was clicking, I'm not going to poo-poo it too much. I think they could definitely shoot above what we would expect most lines in the NHL to shoot. Also, Gaudreau had this new shooting role on the power play, which didn't actually help his goal scoring numbers a ton, but I think it factored in big to his 19 power play assists. Like he was taking more shots on the power play, but he only shot 8%, which means he either deserved another goal or two there, or this was by design, and we need more info in our Calgary 32 Beats episode of whether Gaudreau was just shooting for rebounds and deflections, taking really low percentage shots so someone else could bang it home and help him pick up those power play assists. So I guess the question now is, with how inconsistent and how all over the place Gaudreau's point totals have been historically, I bit after his 99-point campaign, and it bit to have him on my fantasy roster all of that year. Do we bite for next year on 115-point Johnny Gaudreau?
If he's on Calgary, maybe. Like if he's on another team, I'd be a little worried that, this was like you said, like the chemistry with his line was just so good. It might be hard to match that again, but it'll be really fun to discuss. And obviously, it might just be a couple weeks from now that we're going to be getting on a podcast to talk about where Gaudreau signs. It's interesting, yeah. A lot of these players we're talking about are pending UFAs. I think the real interesting question, of course, and we'll discuss this when the time actually comes, but like if Gaudreau leaves, who takes that spot with Kachuk and Lindholm? Right? Is it like someone like a Tyler Toffoli? Because that would be huge for him, right? Like he was showing us potential superstar potential with that, like, really great stretch in Vancouver, then that good year in Montreal. Last year, Montreal was crazy. And then when he went to Calgary, he didn't get that primo deploymento. So he only put up 23 points in 37 games. But who knows what Toffoli can do if he gets that spot. I know other people are talking, like Hunter in the chat is mentioning like an Andrew Mangiapane. He had a weird season, right? Like he went from like almost point per game for stretches to like totally disappearing. I don't know. He's just someone I just have never been able to like really have a lot of faith in fantasy. So I would be excited for Toffoli. But again, we'll discuss it if and when Gaudreau leaves. But yeah, amazing season for him, and it'll be fun to also obviously discuss this when he leaves, like who he's going to play with on his new team. Okay, so we've done Calgary. Let's move over to the Tampa Bay Lightning, who, what, was it a surprise that they didn't win the cup? I guess no, that's not fair, but they did a good job. But honestly, Brian, I'm going to say good luck to you because I feel like everyone in Tampa did exactly what I thought they would do. Like, I have not to brag, but I feel like I really nailed my Tampa projections.
Well, and that's how they find success. Everyone has a role and they play it to a T, and that brought them to the doorstep of their third straight Stanley Cup. So I did have to do a bit of digging, but I landed with Alex Killorn being my surprising player on this roster because I had to pick someone. This is 10th season, age 32. Did you know that Alex Killorn scored a career high 59 points at age 32 in his 10th year in the league? 14 power play points on the top unit all year long for the second year in a row, by the way. So keep an eye to see if he can do that again next year. And this is not just a career high for Killorn, but only the second time in his career he's paced for more than 50 points. So this is a nice little, nice tidy piece of business for Alex Killorn on the Lightning this season. Thanks a lot to that regular top power play deployment.
Yeah, and I guess maybe honorable mention to Andre Palat, who had that breakout in 2020-21 with a 69-point pace, and he fell back to like his 50-ish point pace that he had been putting up the year before. So, I wasn't that surprised because I think a lot of us weren't expecting Palat to be able to do it again, especially with Kucherov out. But well, I guess it was with Kucherov out that he did it that year before. But anyway, yeah, he's a UFA. So we'll talk about him as well probably in a couple of weeks when we find out where he goes. All right, so next up, we just did Tampa Bay. We're going to the Minnesota Wild. I feel like we already did some Wild talk, right, when we were talking about the Kevin Fiala trade. But now we go back. It's your pick. Oh, yeah, I think I know who you got to go with here.
I mean, I'm definitely on a theme right now with old guys doing things we haven't seen them do before. And Matt Zuccarello in Minnesota fits the bill too. I could have gone with Ryan Hartman. I could have gone with Freddie Gaudreau. But really, what Zuccarello did was just so out of scale compared with what he's ever done in his career. And again, Zuccarello, no spring chicken, age 34 this past season, his 12th year as an NHLer. And he seems to be just finally hitting his stride, the prime of his career. Two of Zuccarello's best seasons had happened in the 3 seasons prior to this one. He had 68-point paces with the Rangers in Dallas. And then like that year, he played like a couple games for Dallas before getting injured. And then in his second year in Minnesota, Zuccarello also had a great season. This isn't a normal aging curve happening here. You don't have the best seasons of your career past the age of 30 in, 98% of cases. But this season, Zuccarello did just that. 24 goals, 55 assists for 79 points in 70 games, which comes out to a 93-point pace, just blowing anything Zook had ever done before out of the water. Biggest role at 5-on-5 ever for Zuccarello was a big part of this, obviously, with his best line mate ever in Kirill Kaprizov as well. But the fun part is that Zuccarello basically just exploded on the power play. Like his 5-on-5, you could say, yeah, he's playing with Kaprizov. That helped, but that wasn't the reason he had the season he had and paced for 93 points. Zuccarello had 28 power play points this season. His career high, never had more than 18. That was back in 2015-16. Basically on the power play, Zuccarello doubled his production rates from the rest of his career. And I think he could do it again. I'm not going to overlook Zuccarello this draft. I think I'm going to draft him to be able to stay pretty static. Although I guess with Fiala out of the picture, I don't know if Minnesota has to change a whole lot about what they're doing, if there are more moving pieces, but it's hard for me to imagine Zuccarello away from Kaprizov at even strength or on the power play. And I am hoping for another big year from him at age 35.
I mean, yeah, it's like obviously mostly just a show of support for Kaprizov. Like, I just feel like Kaprizov's so amazing, and if Zuccarello's the one who's going to play with him, I just don't see why. Like you say, like he'll just be able to do it again. Like I think Zuccarello's clearly a good player. Hopefully, he doesn't like fall off, with this extra year added to his legacy. But only age 35, it's not terrible, and like he did it at 34. Kaprizov's only getting better, right? So I'm with you that he could probably do it again. Let's go to New Jersey. And that's my team. Finally, I get to go. And I'm going to say I've got two honorable mentions of players who disappointed me before I'll say the player who surprised me in a positive way. Like, first of all, Dougie Hamilton. We got to say it. But to be fair to Dougie Hamilton, he started the season really strong. He had 12 points in his first 16 games. It was looking like everything we hoped he would be. Then he got injured. He had that jaw injury, kept him out so long. And then by the time he came back, he wasn't that good, and he wasn't even on the top power play. It was a huge disappointment, but probably a lot of that had to do with in that conversation that Ben had with Shayna Goldman. I think she said pretty much like he wasn't feeling comfortable. That jaw thing still wasn't fully fixed. So I'm willing to kind of write off what happened and say that just a sucky year for him with that injury, and I'd be expecting him to be like a really good value pick for next year. Like he doesn't have any votes yet in our patron rankings, and we're on 31, 32 at this point. I think we're getting to a point where you could do really well drafting Dougie Hamilton. Brian and I had a long chat about him on our Patreon cast, so you could go check that out if you want some more Dougie Hamilton talk. Another disappointing player that I'm not going to be as high on him again, maybe ever again, is Mackenzie Blackwood, a guy who I thought was ready to become maybe a volume goalie in the league, like someone that might be a good, he had a really strong start to his career. Those first 2 years in New Jersey, he had a 918 save percentage in 23 games as a rookie. Then he had a 915 save percentage in 47 games the next year. But this past year, I know there's injuries and who knows, but at this point it sounds like he's also kind of on the outs of the teams. I don't know. He really stunk last year, 892 save percentage. I wonder if even someone like a Nico Dawes has gone ahead of him in the depth chart. And the Devils just really need to find a new goalie because it's not working out with Mackenzie Blackwood, it seems, which is too bad because he seemed like a really strong prospect just recently. He's still only 25 years old. So those are my disappointments, but I think I'm going to have to go with a positive surprise here, and it's got to be Jesper Bratt, right? What a breakout for a guy who had never paced higher than 53. But this is like a Kuznetsov breakout, and I'm not going to pull a Brian and say Jack Hughes here because we all know that Jack Hughes is really great. Even though he was he was better, fine. But yeah, Hughes was surprising to me, and how amazing he was for sure. He's definitely also deserves an honorable mention. But Bratt is someone who I don't think anyone really expected this from. Point per game, 26 goals, was shooting a decent amount, just everything got really well for him. It actually could have been even better. He sort of slowed down right at the end of the year when Jack Hughes was injured, so that might make him a bit of a value guy depending on how people think about him going into your drafts. Maybe he left a bad taste in people's mouths with only 13 points in his last 19 games. He was the opposite of a Jeff Petrie for me, for my Cupful team. Petrie was someone who I just picked up for the playoffs, and then he was huge for my stretch run. Jesper Bratt was huge in helping me get to the fantasy playoffs, and then I ended up dropping him before the finals because he really slowed down again, like I said, after Hughes got injured. But assuming Hughes is healthy next year, it seems like they have great chemistry. So I think this could be another huge year for Bratt, assuming he holds that deployment.
Absolutely. Career best deployment, both in terms of minutes and power play opportunity and line mate. If Jesper Bratt gets to play, if he's Jack Hughes's wingman, that's huge, right? You don't need to ask too many questions, especially with the quality of play we've seen from Jesper Bratt himself, who first came on the scene, a few years ago, and we saw a nice little run, and it was hard to believe. And the longer it kept up, the more I was like, yeah, this guy's really good. But then he never really took the next step until this season, which, by the way, isn't so awful. I mean, he's played 5 years in the league already, but he just finished his age 23 season. So Jesper Bratt technically is still, or about to be, in the prime of his career, heading into his age 24 season in 22-23. So I'm not thumbing my nose, even with that bout of quiet or non-existent production towards the end of the season. I am still feeling pretty good about Bratt. And to your point before, Elon, I'm feeling pretty good about Hamilton. Also, I'm curious to see how far he falls. Jeff Petrie was drafted 57th overall on average in our Cupful drafts last season. I'm curious to see if Hamilton falls that far. It sounds like with no votes on him yet, there's a chance he's going to make it at least past 40.
Yeah, I just voted for Hedman, and now today, who did I go with? Let me see here. I went today with, is this interesting podcasting while I browse up a chat? Oh, Aho. So yeah, Aho I'll still take over Hamilton just because he's still I still feel like these like again these superstar forwards, I feel like you could just at least set your watch to 80 points. I still do think that Aho has room for more. I know you've kind of said, Brian, at points that you think Aho may have stabilized, but anyways, we don't have time to get into that. Come join the patron Discord channel for only $1 a month over the summer. KeepingCarlsson.com/patron. You could join the conversation of if we should be considering Hamilton here or if I'm being a wimp. I also like Timo Meyer's getting some votes right now. A lot of people are saying that he's got a lot of a higher upside, which makes sense based on our scoring. But okay, we're going to Arizona now. It's my turn. Some honorable mentions are Shane Gostisbehere. No one saw this coming, right? 51 points in 82 games. Seemed like Philly was just like willing to give him away for free to anyone who would take him. And Arizona ended up getting a top power play defenseman who was like really valuable in fantasy pretty much all season long. And this was even more surprising considering the fact that Jacob Chikrin had that breakout just the year before. He was clearly supposed to be the guy. And yet somehow Gostisbehere comes and like he takes Chikrin's spot. Like, who saw that coming? That was crazy. So that's an honorable mention. And I guess Chikrin gets the other honorable mention, right? Like, what happened to him? 21 points in 47 games, a 37-point pace when he had a 60-point pace the year before. Probably like he should be the answer. But again, I want to be positive here. We're nearing the end of the pod, so let's be happy and talk about Clayton Keller, a guy who people were thinking at some points maybe Chaika made a big mistake with that long contract extension. It didn't seem like it was really working out. He'd been around a 50-point guy in each of his previous 3 seasons after that 65-point rookie breakout. And then this season started. Nothing special for Keller. 13 points in his first 21 games. Seemed like just more of the same. And then all of a sudden, he explodes for 50 points in his next 46 games before sadly getting shut down. And, whatever. That was like bad breaks that happened to a lot of people throughout the season. But Keller, just like you can't forget that amazing run he went on. And I think, people are going to look at the totals on the season and be like, it was a fine season. He had like a 77-point pace. But don't forget how amazing he was after that slow start. And you might be like, yeah, but who's he going to play with in Arizona? But Brian, like, who was he playing with in Arizona this year? Like, he made Nick Schmaltz like an amazing superstar in fantasy. So I think Keller was a huge surprise, and I'm really excited to see if he'll be able to build on that. Like, I know he had a high shooting percentage that helped, but I just feel like this was a breakout, and this is a guy who seems clearly good enough to potentially carry a line, even if like he's not playing with superstars.
I think it's really funny. Like, I think you name him Clayton Keller your positive surprise, but I think you're still underselling him and saying, he's on the 77-point pace. Like, that's amazing for Clayton Keller. And you're like, for this run he went on, if you're not believing it, that run was 51 games over like 4.5 months. So like, this is the season Clayton Keller has. And guess what? He is 1 day older than Jesper Bratt. So he's just heading into his age 24 season 2 and could finally just be starting to hit his stride. You're right to name your concern with his shooting percentage. He shot 16% at even strength when he's normally in his career shot closer to 10%. So yeah, that's like a few extra goals that he might have lucked into with a higher than usual conversion rate. But at the same time, I could look on the power play and say he only converted at 11%. And in fact, in his career, he's been a terrible power play shooter. Clayton Keller has had more success shooting at 5-on-5 in his career than on the power play, even though his power play shooting numbers, like his expected goals rates, are way better than they are at 5-on-5. So if Clayton Keller can figure out this piece of the puzzle, maybe because there's no other threats in Arizona on the power play. I mean, you mentioned Shane Gostisbehere. He was definitely there this past season. But maybe goalies can key in on him too much from high danger positions. But there might be still an element of Clayton Keller's game heading into his age 24 season that we haven't yet seen. And I'm feeling pretty good about seeing a lot of this stay. Of course, it's still concerning that it's Arizona, but I think the new coach, Andre Turini, helped Clayton Keller the same way he helped Shane Gostisbehere, the same way he helped probably Nick Schmaltz. Everybody on the roster was able to. It was almost like a quieter Don Granato effect that we saw over in Buffalo. So I'm excited to see what Keller can do next season. I am a little concerned that he's probably not going to have much more help next year than he did this year, but I'm happy to draft him as a 65 point player. And I might be interested in him a little sooner than my drafting companions.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely could see myself getting him as well. Like Arizona, though, man, they have a lot of cap space. Like if they could convince people to come to their team, they could potentially get some good players in free
Play in front
agency.
of the 5,000 people for the next few years, which actually, I'm going to be honest, it sounds pretty cool. Like a lot of people are knocking the Coyotes for being in this like temporary university arena, but that sounds fun.
I don't know. It
I don't
sounds kind
know.
of fun for me to play in a huge stadium in front of tens of thousands of
Yeah, I'm not a
people, but
professional athlete. Like, yeah, I guess I feel the difference when I walk into like the 67s or the Carlton University rink compared to the Canadian Tire Center. It's true. Okay, I know what ice I'd rather be skating on. I'm just trying to help them sell it
yeah.
so Clayton Keller can meet our newly high expectations.
I wonder if they're going to get a goalie this year. Are we going to be like Karel Velmelka again? Anyways, okay. Let's go to the next team, Brian. Pittsburgh, it's all you.
Okay, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, not a very surprising team. Like I'm hard pressed to find a surprise. I think Tristan Jarry surprised a lot of people who were ready to give up on him really quickly. Like Jarry was left for dead after the 2021 playoffs and then scored like Jarry was left for dead after basically blowing up during the 2021 playoffs and when the last chances that the Pens had this cord together, the Penguins fans were not ready to forgive him for a very long time, but he basically forced them to with his play this season. Jarry put up a .919 save percentage, 63% quality starts, and 56 starts before getting injured, but he was one of the biggest workhorses in the league this year, put up great numbers doing it. So that might have been a surprise to some, but I think he was like, I'm not going to say I'm not surprised at all, but I am going to say it shouldn't. Everyone reacted, I think, way too strongly to his playoff collapse. If I'm trying to find an actual surprise, maybe I'll go with, I don't know, Evan Rodriguez, Elon. That's where I'm landing. I think this is actually an even harder team than Tampa to find a surprise on. Rodriguez had a 43-point pace, tied for his career best, but really, that's not the surprising piece. The surprise was the one run he had, picking up 19 points in 16 games from late December to early January when he was playing with Sidney Crosby. That was huge for Erod. It was surprising that he was able to hold on to that deployment because he never has in his career and make really good use of it, which, as we talked about on the show, wasn't so surprising. Like his career numbers, Rodriguez looks like he could be a legit top six player. He's just never, ever, ever been given a consistent opportunity to be that guy. So it was nice to see him get like a run of about a month or a little more being in that place and cashing in while he was there.
Yeah, yeah, he was good, and I think he's UFA again now. You can correct me if I'm wrong here. So we'll see if he can never do this again, if it's on Pittsburgh or if he goes to another team. I guess maybe one player I'll throw out. Ricard Raquel was someone who I just figured as like this like really awesome player who just was in a bad situation in Anaheim. I thought maybe he could really take off in Pittsburgh. He only had 13 points in 19 games. Like wasn't that exciting around like it was okay, like 55-ish point pace. It's only 19 games, small sample size. I still got my eye on Ricard Raquel. I still think there is a potential for a
Definitely.
big season from him, but this is the last chance. Okay, if he signs with the new team and he has a boring year, I'm not going to expect like a Joe Pavelski like take 2 years and then turn it around. Like I still think he has it in him, and I might draft him late in leagues if I can. But like the leash is running short.
I liked him on Pittsburgh and I thought it was a fit. And I don't know if there's any possible way they can make it work again. I feel like they would if they could. But first, figure out Malkin and Letang and then we'll see.
Sorry. Okay. Okay, so we got 3 teams to go, Brian. Let's go to the Vancouver Canucks, and it's another U team. We've been on a Brian roll lately. Who do you got over in Vancouver?
In Vancouver, I'll just, again, not a terribly, okay, sorry. I've got JT Miller in Vancouver, Elon. No suspense here. There were some very surprising starts to the season, especially from Pettersson, who just couldn't find his game. But, anyone who stayed with him through to that all-star break made out like bandits at the end if you lasted long enough to survive in your pool, and he could help you at that point. But JT Miller, start to finish, was incredible. I'm actually not sure what more we can say about him. We've talked about Miller a lot. And so I guess we could just repeat JT Miller's numbers again. Age 28. Do you know he was a former first rounder? He was picked 15th overall in 2011 by the Rangers. Just for fun, I'm not going to quiz you because it's impossible, but picked ahead of JT Miller at 15th overall in the first round. Jamie Alexiak, Sven Berchi, Ryan Murphy. I'm going 14 and up. Duncan Siemens, Jonas Brodin, And then you get to the good stuff at 9. You've got Dougie Hamilton, Sean Couturier, Mark Scheifele, Zibanejad, Strome, Larson, Huberdeau, Landeskog, Nugent Hopkins. But basically, there's a gap between the 9th pick and then JT Miller down at 15. Even after him, this was like not a great first round. Like I'm struggling to find. I see Phil Deneau and Rickard Rakell as being like the only two other NHL impact players picked.
But hey, Brian,
at
least the Sens got Zibanejad, right? So that obviously really set them up
well,
as a franchise.
How else could they have gotten Brassard without Zibanejad? What a gift. So yeah, JT Miller, amazing. Pace for above 100 points with 99 points in just 80 games. Scored 38 power play points, 2.5 shots per game. 3 great years in Vancouver now for JT Miller. He's paced for 86 points, 71 points, and now 101 points. Seems pretty for real. So that was a surprise that he was able to really find another level to his game. And this is a guy who I think just, again, hasn't had the opportunity that he's getting to be this superstar in Vancouver, and good on him for running with it, unlike most other first round draftees in 2011.
Yeah, at least after the 9th pick. Okay, I think that we're going to, yeah, at least after that 9th pick. I've made that analogy like mid-season. I can't shake it, where I feel like JT Miller could end up being like the next Marchand, just in like someone who had like, half of his career being solid and then like the second half just like exploding. And so we've seen 1 year of it. Let's see if he can keep it up and actually like cement that analogy for me that he's turning into a Marchand, at least in terms of fantasy. But okay, Brian, we've got 2 more to go, Colorado and Winnipeg. 2 teams that are both mine. So I just get to stretch out here, take over the show, and we're going to start with your Stanley Cup champions, the Colorado Avalanche. We already talked about Devontae. Okay, what are you laughing about? You also laughed so much when I was talking about.
Oh, sorry. The other time it was because I got a funny text.
Okay.
But this time it was just because like I appreciate you trying to sound so excited.
Oh, okay.
I hear you. I'm happy. You make me happy.
You're Stanley Cup champions, the Colorado Avalanche. We talked a lot about Devon Toews. Sorry. We get in there. Okay. We talked a lot about Devon Toews on our last Patron cast a couple of weeks ago. He was amazing. I'm a little surprised. Sorry. He was amazing. Still like a little surprising, obviously, how good he was. He had a 57-point pace. Brian was comparing him to like a Ryan Ellis, someone who was capable of like putting up big points back when he was on Nashville, even without getting top power play. I wouldn't be surprised if Devon Toews can do it again next year in Colorado. They're just such a high-scoring team, and he's like a big part of it. Normally, I'd think someone like a Valerie Nichushkin had a good enough season to be the answer here for the most surprising season. 52 points in 62 games for a 69-point pace. This is a guy who Jaromir Jagr once said was going to be like a superstar in the league, and it seemed like Jagr really missed the mark on that one. He was a total dud, but after he got drafted, he had 34 points in his rookie season with Dallas, and that was his previous career high before this year, where he really just took off. He was trusted by the coach. 19 minutes of ice time on a cup-winning team, clearly like a very important part of this championship team. And he also produced in the playoffs, 15 points in 19 games. He's coming off a 2-year, $5 million AAV contract. Dude is going to get paid this summer. But speaking of getting paid, someone else is going to get paid a lot this summer, and that's my pick in Nazem Kadri. 87 points in 71 games on a 100-point pace. He also had 15 points in 15 playoff games, including the big Game 4 OT goal in the finals after missing 5 games with injury. Like, wow. And this is a guy whose previous career high was 61 points with the Leafs. So he like a 40-point jump from his previous career high to what he did this past season. He was only a 47-point pace guy last season. He was like not even rosterable in a lot of leagues just 1 season ago. And this year he was like right at the top, like someone you could have drafted at the end of the first round and he would have given you that value. Obviously, a lot of it came down to his huge time on ice increase. He was averaging like 19 minutes, 15 seconds a game. He had the highest percent power play of his career. So those are 2 things to watch out for. Like when he goes to his new team, if he doesn't go back to Colorado, which I doubt he will. But, is he going to be able to get as much power play time and as much ice time? That'll be a question. He also took the most shots per game of his career, but obviously that has to do with the extra ice time and the extra power play time. So I think deployment is going to determine if he's going to be able to do this again. I'm probably not going to draft Nazem Kadri no matter where he goes because I just feel like, again, it's maybe just my style. A player in his 30s that just had a career year, very Chris Kreidery, and I'm going to let someone else take the swing. But like, I'm really happy for him. Like, he's taken a lot of crap from Leafs fans, and so now he was able to rub it in their faces a little bit for anyone who said that he was like not someone you could depend on in the playoffs.
Yeah, from Leafs fans for that reason, and from Blues fans for other unfortunate reasons. Nazem Kadri's been through it, and it's great that it is really great to see that he had such a fantastic season this year. And I keep looking to find like, okay, so where should we expect Kadri to regress next season? And I'm not seeing like anything that's like
He'll
obviously
regress from not being on Colorado and not
so.
being on the team that scores so many goals.
That's it. Well, the only thing I can do right now is operate on the assumption that he's going to be back, which is false. Is likely untrue, right? He's going to command much more. Like he could probably take a discount and stay in Colorado or get like the life-making contract somewhere else. So we'll see what ends up happening. But just based on this season, Colorado, if he were to repeat next season in exactly the same place, I'm really not finding where he overperformed, like where he had the shooting luck or the points participation luck. Like he had a legit, I think there's no other, he had a legit 100-point season for Kadri. One reason might have been that he saw more minutes than he's ever seen in his career. He's never averaged more than 17 and a half minutes a night. This season with Colorado, Kadri saw over 19 minutes a night. And again, that's because he's on the top power play. And being on the top power play in Colorado means you're like always on the ice because they draw more penalties year after year than any other team in the league. So that was huge for Kadri, putting up 29 power play points. Just a fantastic year for him. And I think even if he does end up somewhere else, like, yes, it's going to be different. He might not get 100 points again, but I still wouldn't be surprised to see him set the second highest points mark of his career, which, remember, he paced for 75 points back in his first full season as an NHLer. That was a lockout shortened season, though, so it was only over 48 games. He had 44 points. I think he has a shot at being near that pace with another team if they let him loose and play to his strengths the same way that Colorado did.
Yeah, so we'll obviously do a deep dive into him once we find out where he's going in just a couple of weeks. So I'm going to try to get a good draft interview after the NHL draft we'll try to, I guess I won't throw out the names because then you'll know who turned me down, but I'm going to try to get someone good on the show. And then, then Brian and I will be back in, I guess, a couple of weeks to talk about all the UFA stuff. But one more team still for this episode, and that's the Winnipeg Jets, for those of you keeping track. Isn't that fun, Brian? The last team in the alphabet ends up being the last team in our randomly generated list.
Sorry, Winnipeg fans.
It always happens. So, a lot of good, but they had good luck in terms of a lot of players bouncing back from bad seasons, right? Pierre-Luc Dubois wasn't that good. All of a sudden last year bounced back. Unfortunately, he's already announced that he's going to be testing UFA in a year. So I don't know, maybe they could try to change his mind a la Jake DeBrusk or who was someone we brought up on this episode that, Tarasenko, right, who like we thought that there wasn't a chance, and now it seems like they're fine. So we'll see. Josh Morrissey also had a nice bounce back season. He was really solid, especially like after a bit of a slow start. You could definitely go Connor Hellebuck here, right? I don't think anyone was expecting a 910 save percentage. Like he was a 916 guy the year before, and I think a lot of people would have expected him to like bounce back from that, because the year before he was a 922 when he won the Vezina, but instead he fell down another 6 spots. Save percentage spots to 910 save percentage. I really think he should play less. Maybe the new coach, Rick Bowness, will agree. It'll be fun to see. Brian, what do you think about Rick Bowness? Remember, we were kids, and Rick Bowness was the first coach of the Ottawa Senators, and now we're still talking about him as a grown man.
Yeah, you remember the 6-second clip or in photo of him pointing to the crowd after they won their first game, the first franchise game against Montreal.
I think I was asleep.
Big night for all of us. I mean, I was probably also asleep, but I've seen the clip 1,000 times since.
Okay. So I'm curious to see what will happen with Hellebuck. I think that the Jets, either they go with Comrie as the backup, but actually play him more because he was pretty solid. I just think if you're going to keep playing Hellebuck 70 games, whatever, that's great for him for fantasy in terms of volume. But I just don't know if, at least on this team, maybe Bonus changes the team around. But I don't know. I don't think he's going to do much better unless he plays a little less. That's my guess.
Well, Rick Bowness is a defensive coach, right? So I think this could help Connor Hellebuck. Not maybe, that he needs the help, but he's also better when he seems like one of those guys. I haven't looked into the numbers for a while. He seems like one of those guys who's better when he's busy.
Is he? I don't know. Not this past
Yeah.
season.
No, not this past season.
All right. So, but my pick's going to be Kyle Connor, of course, right? Like, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but yeah, he had a 73-point pace 2 seasons ago. And I thought that was like something reasonable to expect. I did not think he was going to jump up to 47 goals and 93 points, 4 shots per game. He had a huge time on ice boost. We'll have to see if Bonus loves him as much as Paul Maurice and, like, whoever was in charge. Who was it after Maurice again for the end of the season?
Oh, Lowry, Dave Lowry.
Sounds right. I think that sounds right. Yeah, Dave Lowry, you're right. Good job, Brian.
Yes.
Yeah, so I like hopefully Connor could get that same deployment that led to him getting all of those goals, right? Because that's a lot for a forward, right? 21 minutes and 47 seconds on average. I think that he probably dodged a bullet from Trotz not being interested in the job because I feel like that would hurt him. Though, like you say, Bonus is also a bit of a defensive coach, but at the same time, I mean, Robertson and Hintz and Pavelski did pretty well last year in Dallas. So if they're just going to load up that top line, I don't see why Kyle Connor can't be similar. So I'd be curious to get your take, Brian. He was ranked 14th in our patron rankings, a huge jump. Chris Kreider, not even ranked yet, basically had a very similar season. But Kyle Connor, people believe in hugely, and Kreider not as much. But who would you take between, looks like around there was Roman Josi, Shestyorkin, Patrick Kane, Brady Tkachuk, Panarin, Vasilevsky. Those were guys taken after Kyle Connor. Do you think we're like too high on him, or do you think it's fair to like have him this high at number 14?
I'm curious to see if we ask in our Discord server for everyone voting if the coaching hire changes people's perspectives on him. And you're right, Elon. Maybe Rick Bowness will ride a top line in Winnipeg the same way he rode a top line in Dallas, and then everybody else was playing defense. Except I'm not sure who is Faxa, Cogliano, Como comparisons would be in Winnipeg, and whether Winnipeg has those guys, because you can only really play that way if you have those other lines you can lean on. If you can't lean on the rest of the team to handle the defensive load, then maybe you can't afford to let that top line go out and just run roughshod offensively either. So we'll see if Kyle Connor's the kind of player that Rick Bowness wants to cut slack and let him play the way he plays. I think you whiffed on this one. You called my Ovechkin thing a whiff. I'm calling your Connor thing a whiff.
You knew he was going to score 47?
I'm not surprised. Like, he's been trending this way. He's a super dangerous shooter. He's shooting more. He's seeing more deployment. And one thing I didn't see coming is he had the standard 3 shorthanded points for the folks we've been talking about on the show. 3 shorties goals for Kyle Connor this season. So and like you said, more deployment than ever. So yeah, I think we saw that he had this in him. Like you mentioned, he had 73-point pace a couple years ago. He had an 84-point pace 3 years ago. So like, I'm not shocked. I'm not surprised. Like, yes, was it a really pleasantly surprising? For sure. Like, I didn't see for sure that he could come up and do as much as damage as Kyle Connor did. But I was more surprised in Pierre-Luc Dubois actually somehow picking up his game and being a good, reliable player for a large chunk of the year, which he hadn't been at all, right? The previous season. But basically, Dubois, right when I'd given up on him, went back to being the player he'd been in the second and third seasons of his career. There was a dip for a while, but Dubois was someone I drafted in one league, like right toward like middle 8 rounds. And he was on the chopping block. So like, I'm like, this guy's going to be one of my first drops, and I couldn't drop him. And then I was starting to think of shopping Dubois, thinking that, I better trade him while his value's up. And I looked at his numbers. I'm like, oh no, I think Pierre-Luc Dubois is actually playing really well. And he could be a 70+ point player the rest of the way. He wasn't, but I think there's still potential for him to pull those numbers back up and be more than a 60-point player. At least there was in last year's system. Again, we'll have to wait to see what this year's system brings with Rick Bowness. I'm going to be a little gun shy on a lot of Winnipeg players based on, like, Dubois has asked for, like, he's like, I'm going to test free agency 2 years from now. Okay. Thanks, Pierre-Luc. Really appreciate the update. Mark Scheifele was like so mad in that presser and might want out soon, but like, Wheeler's getting old. Kyle Connor, we'll see how he reacts to the new coach. It seems unpleasant in Winnipeg at the moment. And I think I'd be a little afraid of that team with Rick Bowness as a coach. Yeah, he took the Stars far, but he did a lot of weird things with Dallas. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to play out in Winnipeg.
If you were Rick Bowness and you had the choice, I don't know why I'm doing a weird what if right now, but like he just was coaching Jake Ottinger, having this like insane playoff performance. If he had the option right now to trade like Hellebuck for Ottinger straight up, just for 1 year, forget about their age or their contract or whatever, who would you rely on at this point? Like, I just wonder, because he's going to another team with
tough.
a goalie that you can really depend on, you'd think, but Hellebuck hasn't. I'm sure a lot of the reason why Winnipeg hasn't been as fun is because Hellebuck hasn't been as good.
Yeah, I think like I don't know. My knee jerk is to say Ettinger is the one that I want to rely on. And like I don't know that that's fair to Hellebuck.
Who are you drafting in fantasy first? I think we're going to have them in the same tier in Schmorgoli's board.
I think they'll be really close. Yeah. Like Hellebuck, for what it's worth, still played above his expected save percentage last year, as he has for the last 3 years. And he was really good 2 and 3 years ago. This past year, he was simply good, which is still like, that's good. That's capital G good. Like Hellebuck had a good season.
Above average is not good for a goalie that won the Vezina, right? Like you expect more than just above his expected save percentage.
I mean, maybe the year he won the Vezina, he didn't. I mean,
yeah,
I get it's all different, right?
We're
like
on the same page.
His expected save percentage was lower this year than a little bit lower than it has been in past years. So it shows up in his numbers. So we'll see if Bowness can fix the defensive system around him. But yeah, I think I would go Hellebuck. I can't give you a good reason why though.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I meant Ettinger. Ettinger. Well, yeah.
There goes to show. I don't even remember because I feel like it's close. Yeah. All right. This has been fun. I'm going to go back to my normal voice just to end the show here. And again, give me some feedback on if this was like so terrible and I need to come up with some way to soundproof my room, because it's just like this podcast is not listenable when I don't have the energy. But okay. Thank you so much to everyone for listening to this episode of Keeping Karlsson, part 2 of our surprises. And I guess, like Brian said, we're sort of saying goodbye to the last season. Obviously, we'll be referencing it a lot as we're talking about all the UFAs, but now we're going to be really looking towards the future with the draft, with the free agents coming up. It's going to be a lot of fun over these next couple of months, or at least like the first few weeks coming up. I guess then there's going to be another slightly dead time. But that's when we really like start planning the cupful and designing all that. So like we're definitely going to be very busy here at Keeping Karlsson headquarters, Brian, myself, and then Kevin Hebert, who's helping us with a couple this year as our coordinator. Let me, Brian, give a quick congratulations. We didn't get the chance last episode because I think the playoffs weren't over yet. I can't believe it's just recently that Colorado won the cup. But huge congrats to Anthony T for winning the Keeping Karlsson playoff pool. What an accomplishment. There was like 15 divisions or something to start. And, you know, every round people got eliminated, and Anthony just kept on making it through. He was actually the only person in the semifinals to not be a winner, but the way it was like there were 5 winners and then one person who was the best second place team, and Anthony's team squeaked through and then won it when it counted in the finals. This is a long-time patron of Keeping Karlsson. So Anthony, not only congratulations, but also thank you for all of your support since 2015. You're going to be getting a cool one-of-a-kind cupful, not a couple, a KKPP championship shirt. So yeah, congrats again. Really impressive accomplishment. But with that, Brian, I think we've had a decently impressive accomplishment going through all 32 NHL teams and talking about a surprise from each of them. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you like this and you want to subscribe and be able to get all of the Keeping Karlsson content coming, then just subscribe. I guess I said what you have to do, right? Go to, I don't know, some people still don't really get what podcasts are, but they're great because you could actually subscribe to podcasts.
Who are those people?
I mean, we get like a different number of downloads for different episodes. You'd think if everyone knew what podcasts were, you should just download every episode because you should just set your phone up. I mean, come on, you've got enough data, right? With your home internet, I think you can manage to just like, set it up to only download it when you're on Wi-Fi. You subscribe on Apple. I think Spotify doesn't do it. That's what's annoying. Spotify's like hurting podcasters, right? Like they don't auto download. You have to like actually press to. But I use Pocket Cast and I just like show, every time it's time to listen to a podcast, I say, okay, what's been downloaded lately? Oh, a new Keeping Karlsson. Well, usually I know if there's a new Keeping Karlsson, but for other podcasts that I may not know, I'll be very surprised and happy. So yeah, subscribe if you can. We would obviously appreciate that. We'd also appreciate a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if you could be so kind. That really helps us out. Doesn't cost you anything. If you do have a little spare change to spare, you could become a patron of Keeping Karlsson and support us like all the other awesome patrons who've been with us during the season and even during the off season. We have our off season special going for just $1 a month, and you can get access to our patron cast, which we're going to be doing another patron only show pretty soon. The hangout in the community. Now's a good time, by the way, to ask like some advice questions. There's not as many.
You will get so much attention.
Yeah, and we have a really cool way to do it. You go to the Make a Channel room on Discord, and we have the instructions to make your own like thread just for your question.
Your
So
own
it's a lot of fun.
channel.
Your
So
own
your
channel.
own part of the server.
So that's keepingkarlsson.com/patron for that. But with that, Brian, let's cue the outro music. And why don't you take us out of here with the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our super supporters. Oh, this cookies thing gets in the way every time. Reject all. Don't never ask me again. Including our super supporters, Tyler, Flash, Andrea, get well soon, Tom, Derek, David, and Rob. Also, thank you to our team of moderators on our server. So that's Andrea, Jeremy, and Kevin Hebert. Thank you so much for everything you do. Also, thanks Shams Benamor for keeping the amazing stream of fantasy news rolling on all of our Game Day Twitter accounts. Look at gamedaytweets.com to get hooked up with all of those. Also, thanks to Ben Burnett of Short Shifts at Short Shifts KK for continuing to like these amazing interviews. I watch things closely, but these beat writers watch things closer for their teams. I'm learning so much as I go. So thanks, Ben, for keeping that up. And to you too, Elon, good job. Logo art by BrandonWeave.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, HockeyGoldies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, and Yahoo.
Great job as always, Brian. Looking forward to talking to you about I think next time I talk to you on a podcast is going to be about all the exciting free agency stuff and probably some trades. We're going to have a blast. And I said, we're going to try to get some more beat writer interviews, try to get some draft talk. So yeah, stay subscribed. And Brian, while we wait for the excitement that's about to come, what should we all do in the meantime?
Please do all that you can through the draft. Oh, last year's draft was a very sad moment. Let's hope it's better this year to make sure that fantasy hockey is for everyone.
Sad because the Sens drafted Tyler Boucher at like 14 overall. I know what you're referring to. I'm just kidding around. Okay. All right. See you, everybody. Bye, Brian. It was a really bad pick, though, right? They really blew that pick.
Yeah, I think they really blew that pick.
It's like uncool. I mean, we'll see what he does, but I see prospect rankings now, and it's like he's so far down. Anyway, see ya. Fun show. Please, bye everyone. I'm gonna turn off the stream now.